All right, what's going on? Drive time, Wednesday afternoon. We're looking at about 9 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. It is another beautiful day outside. It is about 52 degrees, clear and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, as it is every single day. It is good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson behind the glass today on this Hump Day edition of the program, this Wednesday edition of the program. You are halfway through your work week. You're one day closer to the weekend, and the madness of March is upon us. We've got the ACC tournament, second round action going on right now in the studio. North Carolina with a 20-point lead over Notre Dame. Iowa State took care of Cincinnati earlier in the Big 12 championship, second round action, which means Iowa State advances on to the quarterfinals, where tomorrow Iowa State will be looking for a little bit of payback. It is Iowa State and it is BYU. That's going to be a 10:30 a.m. start. That will be on ESPN2 or ESPN Plus in Big 12 tournament action. So we'll get you all the latest from the conference tournaments going on. We'll do a little bracketology update. How many Big 12 teams are high speed ahead of the tournament? What does it mean for the seeding for BYU? Utah State clearly in the mix to make the NCAA tournament. So we'll get to the latest with the local stuff. The University of Utah will not go to the tournament and will not have postseason basketball in their reality. It's been 9 years, 9 times, Ferris Bueller. For those Gen Xers out there, since the Utah Utes made the NCAA tournament, they had a 12-point lead there in the first half. Then everything fell apart. UCF ran away 87-72, and Utah basketball done for the year. So now we talk about what's next, and what's next under the new head coach for the Utes, Alex Jensen, the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. Little insight on the program today about how this all went down. A little bit of new information we're going to bring to you on the program. A phone call that sealed the deal to bring Alex Jensen back home to coach the Utes. So stay tuned for that. Utah Jazz are back in action tonight. They're taking on the Memphis Grizzlies. It is a jam-packed night of NBA action after a little bit of a quiet night, at least for March, in pro basketball last night. Cleveland Cavaliers won their 15th straight basketball game. Donovan Mitchell continues to be incredibly impressive. So a little bit of NBA action last night, but not a lot. There's not a ton. So we get a full slate of NBA basketball tonight while you're waiting for the local stuff. As far as the college game goes, you can tune into the Jazz and the Grizzlies tonight. The latest with the NFL offseason carousel. My goodness, a lot of NFL news to get to on the program today. We've got a good NFL guest to get to the free agent stuff, which officially began today, but unofficially the information came spilling in starting about 48 hours ago. The San Francisco 49ers are gutting their roster to prepare to pay Brock Purdy. The reality of being an NFL fan is once that rookie deal is up, you got to pay the quarterback, which means talented players must be moved on from. So we'll get to the latest there. Utah Hockey Club back in action tonight. They're taking on Anaheim. They are technically still alive for the wild card. I don't want to be the wet blanket, but I don't think it's going to happen this year. Bill Armstrong, friend of the show, very intentional with his process. Very intentional with how he's gone about building this thing up. So we'll do a little hockey on the program today. Midweek means we're a little bit closer to the weekend, which means we're a little bit closer to the next match for Real Salt Lake. RSL on the road, taking on Houston. A road trip that has not bred a lot of results, historically speaking, for this soccer club. And right now, it is not a great time for RSL fans after a really, really pathetic start to the season. Quite frankly, we'll do a little RSL on the program today. Is Aaron Rodgers high speed ahead to be the next quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers? That's your latest rumor. So we'll get to a bunch of different topics on the show today. We'll kind of bounce around a little bit over the next 4 hours of live sports talk radio. We'll start things off today with Sean Mooney, who is on the call for us. Former Ute, calls games next to Bill Riley as our color analyst. So Sean was on the call last night. We'll do a little bit of a obit as the Utah basketball season came to an unceremoniously end last night. And then we'll kind of look to what's next, as Sean has not joined the program since it became official that Alex Jensen is high speed ahead to come back home and coach the University of Utah. So we'll get Sean's thoughts on that right off the bat. We're going to bring in Aaron Schatz to talk some NFL, latest with the NFL free agency Latest with the quarterback carousel, Sam Darnold to Seattle. The Seahawks choose Sam Darnold over Geno Smith. What's next for Aaron Rodgers? Justin Fields to the Jets, I guess. Aaron Schatz will stop by. Sarah Todd covers the Utah Jazz for the Deseret News. 5 years ago, yesterday, the NBA and then the world shut down as a result of COVID, as a result of the lockdown. Rudy Gobert test positive. The Jazz were down in OKC. Sarah was part of the traveling party, if my memory serves me correctly, so she'll stop by. We'll do a little story time, some memories with Sarah Todd. And then the head coach, the manager of RSL, good vibes guy, but I'm a results over vibes guy. Pablo Mastroeni stops by. We're going to have to get with Pablo today to see if he's concerned about the start of the season for his little soccer club and what's next starting coming up this weekend against Houston. So Sean Mooney, Aaron Schatz, Sarah Todd, Pablo Mastroeni, me, Spence Checketts, all of you the great listeners. Happy Wednesday. Happy 52 degrees, sunny and clear Wednesday as some snow and rain is high speed ahead for the weekend. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you the great listeners, that guy Porter Larson on a Wednesday afternoon. I got to say, I feel like the way that Utah lost that game last night was kind of an embodiment of the season, and I think it was just time to get this thing over with. It would have been fun to see him make a run, but if we're being real, I think it was probably time just to let's put this one behind us. Now let's focus on what's next.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where everyone's at. That's where the program is, and that's, as you said, kind of how last night felt. It encapsulated where the program is. Now, from what I understand, there is a potential of them accepting one of the obscure tournament invites. They actually are probably going to do that if they get the invite. But again, as you said, results means in the NCAA tournament, in the Big 12 tournament, and it just didn't feel like we were going to get that. Even though I liked the fight, I liked the energy from this team to kind of finish off the year, go out fighting against BYU. It never seemed like the team totally gave up, but they did run out of gas. They kind of ran out of energy there. And credit to Josh Eilert and the crew for not letting the wheels fall off. But yeah, you turn the page, you look to what's next, and what's next for this program is something a lot of folks on the Hill and a lot of folks in Salt Lake City are pretty excited about.
No doubt, no doubt. So it's always fun to have some optimism, and I think Alex Jensen has brought that optimism to this market. So we'll get to it on the program today. Sean Mooney will be our first guest right out of the gates on this Wednesday afternoon. But before we get to Sean, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too at Prize Picks, it is time now on a Wednesday for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
So, Big 12 tournament, Big 12 men's basketball tournament. It was the first foray into Big 12 tournament play for the Utah Utes, taking on the UCF Knights, the team that beat them in Orlando just a few weeks back. It was the final game for Craig Smith. After that loss in Orlando, Craig was shown the door. And last night at Big 12 Championship, Kansas City, Phillips 66, shout out to the sponsor, let's be clear, in Kansas City. The UCF Knights were able to really run away from the Utes after a solid start to the game. So Utah was up 12 in the first half. They were really utilizing their massive size. The starting lineup, the Coach Eilert marched out. The smallest player was Gabe Madsen. Gabe is 6'5", and he's all of 6'5", and he's a big-bodied kid. And he was the smallest player in that starting lineup. And it was working for a while. A lot of rim runs, a lot of dives, a lot of dunks, a lot of layups, a lot of driving kicks, a lot of aggressive play early. They were dominating the glass early. Lawson had some good dunks, some good layups. Keanu Dawes was an animal. And we'll get to Keanu in a minute. But they were crashing the glass. They were getting layups and dunks. They were not relying on the outside shot because, quite frankly, they're not a great three-point shooting team. And then after Utah went up 12, Johnny Dawkins went zone. And then everything changed because Utah does not have, outside of Gabe and probably Hunter Erickson, they don't have a lot of big-time three-point shot makers. Miro Little had a really good game against Brigham Young. He struggled last night. He did hit 1-3, but he fouled out in 12 minutes of play. So Coach Eilert tried to adjust. He tried to essentially tinker with a couple of different lineups to match up with that zone defense and counter what Johnny Dawkins did, but nothing was working because they could not hit the broadside of a barn. Shrov Jamps was 0 of 6 from 3. I actually thought it was going to be worse than that because my man was jacking up threes. He just could not hit a shot. Gabe was only 2 of 9. As a team, they were 4 of 26 from 3, and UCF essentially was daring them to shoot it because it was the attacking the glass, attacking the painted area, as Hubie Brown would say, getting dunks and layups that allowed Utah to get off to that 12-point lead. And then defensively, it just wasn't good enough. Keyshawn Hall had 23. He shot 14 free throws. Darius Johnson had 20. And ultimately, UCF was able to utilize a defensive adjustment. They got a random good game out of Jordan Ivory Curry, who had 15 points off the bench, and he was questionable prior to the start of the game. Weren't even sure if he was going to be able to actually play, but he gave them a little bit of a shot of life. And after that 12-point lead in the first half, UCF runs away with it. So as Porter referenced, there are some obscure postseason tournaments maybe on the table for Coach Eilert and this Utah Utes team. But for all intents and purposes, the season ends once again. I mean, for me, the standard that we should hold this program to is the NCAA tournament every single year. That's just my opinion. Is that reality? Probably not. But if Utah basketball is going to get back to where we're used to seeing it be, at least, back in the day, for those of us that were around when it was good year in and year out, every single year they should be, if not making the tournament, knocking on the door to be considered as an automatic qualifier if you don't win the Big 12 championship. And if we're honest, they're not close to that. So the conversation turns to now what's next. And Tim McMahon, who joined our show on Tuesday, who covers the Dallas Mavericks for ESPN, reported that Alex Jensen will finish the season with the Dallas Mavericks, but has been given complete permission and carte blanche from the ownership of the Mavs to do what he needs to do to hit the ground running here in Salt Lake. Tim reported that Alex was at the Big 12 championship. He was going to be there for the tournament. I didn't see him shown on television. If I missed it, I was fast-forwarding through a lot of commercials. Maybe I missed a screenshot here or there. But if you're Alex Jensen, what did you see last night, and what does that mean about how you would like to proceed? Last minute, bad news for Utah, which I didn't even know was a thing. Ezra Asar got hurt against Brigham Young, and right as they started the broadcast, the very first shot that the camera captured was Ezra on the bench in street clothes. So he did not go last night. Now, Keanu Dawes got the start. The Keanu Dawes storyline, as the season has unfolded after Craig was let go, has been probably the most fascinating thing that we could talk about with his team. And look, I don't know if it's just as simple as Josh Eilert liking Keanu Dawes more than Craig Smith liked Keanu Dawes. I have no insight here. But the fact of the matter is, after Josh took over for Craig, the splits were following. So the 3 games prior to Craig's firing, Keanu played 14 minutes, 12 minutes, and 17 minutes. And the games after that, 26 minutes, 23 minutes, 21 minutes, 21 minutes, and 38 minutes. Last night, he played 38 minutes. He had 21 points. He had 15 boards. Both of those were career highs. Now, he's got some limitations offensively. He's not super skilled. What I love is he tries to dunk everything. He's got elite athleticism. He's got intense ability to attack. He's always playing with an aggressive nature. He doesn't shoot well from the outside, doesn't handle it very well. He's not a playmaker, but he is a dog as an athlete. And 21 points, 15 boards in 38 minutes. He had 15 points and 11 rebounds against ASU. He had 18 points and 10 boards against Arizona. So in 3 of the 5 games that Keanu's played in after Craig was fired and Josh took over, he's had a double-double. And if you're Alex Jensen, did you see that athleticism? Did you see that aggressive mentality? And did you say to yourself, that's a kid that I would like on my roster next year? I mentioned Ezra, who is a junior, eligible to come back next year. Hunter Erickson, a senior. You kind of tip the cap to Hunter, who had a couple of years at Brigham Young, went to SL Slick and played some hoops, then came here and did a good job in his role. So we say goodbye to Hunter Erickson. We say goodbye to Caleb Lohner, who took the path less traveled by, starting his career for Larry here at Utah, heading down to play for Mark at Brigham Young, going down to play for Scott Drew at Baylor, coming back to Utah to play football and basketball. And now Caleb is going to go try his hand at pro football. Lawson Lovering, tip of the cap, big that really developed and turned into a very solid pivot. He takes off as a senior. Gabe Madsen leaves campus as the all-time leading three-point shot maker in Utah history. His brother, Mason, also a senior. Shravjamps is a junior. He's got great measurables at 6'9". There are a lot of holes in his game. He's a lead guard that doesn't shoot it well from the outside. Do you believe in his evolution? Do you think he can keep improving? Is Alex Jensen interested in having Mike Shravjamps back on campus next year? Jake Walleen is the other player I'd point out. Jake had some moments in the first half. It was not his finest game. He had 7 points. He had 4 assists in 25 minutes. Missed all 3 of his three-point shots, but nobody could hit the broadside of a barn from 3 last night. So those are the players that if you're Alex Jensen, if you're at the Big 12 tournament and you're following this program, of which, of course, Alex does, you're kind of debating whether or not you want them on the roster next year. We'll get back to this because I do have some insight on the process that led to Alex accepting the job. Some new information that I was able to uncover over the past 24 hours. We'll get to that coming up in a little bit. Sean Moody's going to be our first guest right out of the gates. But before we catch a break, I got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks, which is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It's very easy to do. And if you've been interested in getting into the world of kind of betting on sports, this is the way to do it because you don't have to worry about all the terminology that can be confusing. All you do, and we'll use tonight's Jazz game as an example. Jazz are taking on the Memphis Grizzlies. So Ja Morant, more or less than 23.5 points. Walker Kessler, more or less than 2.5 blocks. Something like that. You pick more or less, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. It's as simple as that. And they're giving you free money, so you may as well take advantage of that. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. And when you place your first $5 bet, you're going to be rewarded with an extra $50 completely free. You don't even have to win the $5 bet. You just get the $50 with our good friends at PrizePicks. So download that PrizePicks app today. Use that promo code ESPN700. You get $50 when you just play your first $5 bet with our good friends at PrizePicks. Run your game all season long. All right, more on this. More Utah basketball conversation coming up with Sean Mooney, who called the game last night with Bill Riley. And then we'll look ahead to what's next with Alex Jensen taking the job. The latest on the world of pro football with Aaron Schatz. We'll do some Jazz with Sarah Todd and some RSL with Pablo Mastroetti. Off and running on a Wednesday afternoon. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Utah basketball season, for all intents and purposes, comes to an end last night against UCF. Big 12 championship first round, 87-72. We'll see if they accept an invitation to, I don't know, whatever is not the NCAA tournament or the NIT or the CBI or whatever series of letters you want to put together. I'm not sure if that's going to go down. But our next guest may have some insight. Sean Mooney, Wednesday afternoon. Sean, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Spence Checketts, I'm good. How are you, my brother?
I'm well, man. I'm well. So let's just start in a vacuum with what you saw last night. You know, the start was pretty encouraging, and that starting lineup that Josh Eilert marched out there, a bunch of big dudes in the, the straight line dives to the rim. The ability to have some pocket passes in the interior, layups and dunks led them to a 12-point lead. And then Johnny Dawkins goes zone, and it kind of all falls apart. But tell me, Sean, what you saw from your seat.
Yeah, no, good job. You did a good job describing it. Do you have any time for extra color work on the air? I know you spend a lot of time on the radio.
I want all of it, Sean. I want a 20-minute breakdown from you.
You'd be good. No, listen, I mean, so here's the deal. We were really good in that first half. UCF is not typically good defensively, and I've got to give them a little more credit. Last night, I got a little over my skis because I think I was frustrated. So that first half, Keanu Dawes comes in, picks up. Obviously, we're really missing Ez, right? Ez is such an integral part of our team. But we look a little different with Ez out in the sense that we do run a little more motion and we get a lot of back cuts at the rim. I mean, gosh, we probably had 10 dunks in that first half. Keanu Dawes alone probably ripped the rim off 4 or 5 times total in the game. And then they went to a zone late, UCF did. And their zone, I was calling it pretty simple because I was frustrated last night on the air. It's a little more complicated than simple, meaning that they look like they're in a 2-3 zone, and they'll show that through an entire series, or they'll go box and one, or they'll go matchup out of it. So it's a little more complicated than even I was saying last night.
So what's fair to say about the lack of adjustments when Johnny Dawkins did go to that, did go to that zone? And yes, he would stagger it up top, and then they'd break into a matchup zone. And it certainly was more complex than simply a straight 2-3 or a 1-3-1, even though at times it looked like that. But it took the air out of the tires for Utah offensively. Is it lack of adjustment, Sean, or is it just not having the personnel? Because they could not hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah. I mean, you've kind of got to say it's adjustments. I want to say adjustments first. So against the zone, there are lots of things that you can do. And again, give UCF credit because it wasn't just a 2-3. But, obviously we got a lot of what's called a Jordan cut, or we got a catch in the paint free throw line to the restricted circle. And we made an adjustment. We put Hunter in there. And when Hunter was in there, he was a little more aggressive. When Laws was getting that catch, it wasn't quite as good. They're kind of begging him to shoot from there. And we didn't really change it side to side. We kind of got stuck in that catch in the paint. We didn't go short corner. We did go deep corner a couple times, and Jake Wallin early had a wide open 3, and you kind of hope you make one of those because then it maybe makes Dawkins think about it. And I talked to you probably heard this because I know you follow. Coach Larson came on after the show. Tyler Larson, great coach, great kid, great young man. Everyone's a kid to me. Sorry, Coach Larson. And he just said, it doesn't even really matter what we didn't do against the zone because we couldn't defend them. And he's right. We could not defend them in the second half. And we'd really talked about loading up the paint, meaning helping on the Darius Johnson drive, helping on the Keyshawn Hall, not fouling Keyshawn Hall. And we just didn't get it done, Spence. We couldn't get it done defensively.
All right, I want to ask you about Keanu Dawes. First of all, Sean, could you dunk it back in the day?
I mean, yeah, but not in traffic.
Okay.
There's a difference between dunking in traffic, and Keanu Dawes obviously can do that.
Well, the reason I bring it up is I always said that it's a good thing I couldn't dunk the way Keanu could dunk, because if I could dunk, I would only try to dunk. Every time I got the ball, I would try to dunk it every time. And what I love about Keanu is he tries to dunk it every single time. He wants to take your soul. Now, 3 of the 5 games after Josh took over for Craig, he put up double-doubles, and he had a career high in both points and boards last night with 21 and 15. I don't want to be as reductive as to say Josh likes him more than Craig or whatever, but why do you think we waited this long to kind of unleash this weapon?
Complicated, but the main reason probably why KD didn't play as much with Craig is defensive assignments. I would say that sometimes, and he's a sophomore. He played a year at Rice, and I think he was all league academic. So certainly, from an IQ standpoint, he's capable of understanding the assignments. Sometimes what happens with coaches, and this is just my assumption based on what I saw, is he got in the doghouse because of his assignment. He missed his assignments defensively, and then also maybe he was a little tentative. You can certainly see the confidence that he has and that he's been playing with. And I would say as a whole, after Craig, and I think Craig is in Hawaii right now, so I hope he's enjoying himself. I asked Landon, and he said that's where he was. Good for him. I think some of those kids felt a little more on eggshells around Coach Smith in terms of, when they made a mistake. And sometimes as a coach, it's hard to get him back into the flow of things. But, man, yeah, he's blossomed. And you and I talked about this early on, and I told you I thought KD was an important part of our team. And it's turning out that he may have the highest ceiling of anybody, and that's saying something.
Any other takeaways from your eye after watching this team when Craig was let go and Josh took over? Any other schematic changes, lineup changes that stood out to you outside of elevating Keanu and letting him play more minutes?
Not entirely. There were a couple of different. Coach Larson did a lot of that side outs and end outs. They ran similar stuff, but I do think that you saw the schematic difference that really Coach Eiler talked about was punching in the paint, trying to get into the paint. That was successful, and even though we won the paint last night, there were other things that we didn't win. I do think that the kids' intensity in practice, we got to see probably their last practice of the year, possibly, depending on which acronym we get, if we get one. And the intensity level was very high. Bill has seen more practices, and he was especially talking about it. We had, as a team under Coach Majerus, an intensity level that was insane. By the time we got to a game, our starters were ready to play anybody other than us. I think that boded well for them in terms of preparing for what was coming their way.
All right, before we get to what's next, let's give some of these young men a little bit of love who deserve it as they kind of walk out the door. I said this last year after Brandon Carlson graduated. I said, any Ute fan should always remember Brandon Carlson as a Ute legend because he stuck around, he played well, he grew, he evolved, he improved, and now he's making money playing pro basketball. And I think we should say the same thing about Gabe Madsen. Now, I think Gabe himself would tell you this year did not go the way he wanted. I continue to remind people almost on a daily basis, if you're just looking at his splits, if you're just looking at his numbers, you probably think he had a pretty down year. And like I said, by his own accord, my guess is he would say that he did, but every team sold out to stop him. But he leaves Utah basketball as the leading three-point shot maker in the history of the program, which certainly isn't nothing, Sean. So as you've watched Gabe the past few years, what do you have to say about him as he exits the program?
Yeah, it is certainly not nothing. There's so many things to say about Gabe, but last night I was saying this on the air. Gabe, he just struggled with his shot this year, Spence, and you're right. He was top of the list in terms of teams trying to defend him and stop him, and that kind of changed a little bit towards the end of the year because like you said, his percentages weren't the same. He lost his confidence. He kind of got in and out like shooters can do, but he never, ever stopped being a leader, in particular with his defense. Often Gabe was defending the other shooter on the other team or their best player. I would say the biggest improvement Gabe had from year one to last night is his defense and his desire. And he was such a good leader, Spence, on so many levels, a quiet, even-keeled. Every team needs a Gabe Madsen because you can always look to him and expect to get something out of him on every possession. And he did that last night, even though he didn't shoot it great till the very end. He hit a couple, and he had some wide-open threes. And, he missed the layup, and it was tough watching him. I mean, there's always some sadness because – when the end's the end, that's what's happening for everybody.
What about Lawson Lovering, who clearly evolved and improved? And, Craig and Coach Eilert, they ran a lot of their offense through him because of his size and because of his skill. I mean, he really is a skilled passer. The free throw stuff is what it is, but, Lawson, I think, leaves here with his head held high, and his father, a very vocal social media presence, points out that Lawson will leave with his confidence intact, his head held high, and also his degree. So as Lawson exits the program, Sean, what do you have to say about him?
I love what his dad said. I think I actually reposted that because Spence, this year in this business, in the end, man, these are people, right? And getting a degree is what it's about. I mean, now everyone, I think, has a different idea about whether they think that's what it's about. But certainly for me, for my family, that degree's made a big difference. I think Lawson gave his heart and his soul. He's a kid who plays with a lot of passion. He learned how to temper that a little bit. He's the kind of kid that would get fouled hard and then, come running back up the floor and throw himself into somebody. He got better and better at that. He was under a lot of pressure this year. You could really see in the Houston game because we used him as a valve. We used him as a valve in our offense, which means he would come get a catch. And Houston decided not to sag off of him, but to put pressure on him as a passer. And, every other team did something different. BYU did the same thing. They didn't sag off. And then, Laws, I thought, honestly, I thought he got better inside. But one of the strengths of a Big 12 coaching staff is they give a kid what they think he can't make. And so sometimes they tempted him. I thought my favorite thing about him at the end of the season and half part of the season, last half part of the season, was he would look at the basket and his defender would be helping on somebody else, Ez or somebody, and he'd take one dribble and dunk. That was kind of the famous, the good Laws going strong to the hoop.
Last player I'll ask you about, then we'll move on, move on to what's next. Hunter Erickson spent a couple of years at BYU, goes to Salt Lake Community College. I don't know who he thinks he is with that putback dunk against BYU. I didn't know he had that in him. Like, goodness gracious. But as Hunter exits the program, kind of same question. What would you say about him?
Yeah, I mean, another great kid, man. He never needed the limelight or the spotlight. He tried to defend as high a level as he could. He was really physical. He's a really nice kid. Yeah, super athletic. That's going to be one that I'll not forget. Bill and I could not believe it was a big-time dunk in my dreams. And then Hunter he's all about the team, man. He didn't care if he would say this, I don't care where you use me, how you use me. I just want to be a part of the team. And he truly meant that. And, Hunter, he does have a year left now because of the new ruling with the junior college not counting.
Oh, that's right.
I think Hunter is a classic example of a Utah kid. I get to say this because I'm from Utah, who had a successful but not like over the top college basketball career.
All right. One more question here, actually, because I forgot to ask you, Gabe's basketball future. What do you? I don't know if he's an NBA guy. I wasn't sure about Sam Merrill, and obviously Sam has proven me wrong. He's not just an NBA guy; he's a champ, and he's making a lot of money. But do you think Gabe's basketball future includes, the ability to, play somewhere for a paycheck?
I mean, he definitely can play somewhere for a paycheck. I don't think that's going to be the NBA. Sam Merrill is a good playmaker on top of a very good shooter, and maybe more athletic, which is saying something. I think, this is my personal opinion, I think Gabe's knees aren't 100%. I think we saw him fight through some stuff that no one really ever talked about. And I'm not saying that he's got an injury or anything like that, but I would say that he can definitely make a paycheck, and there are a lot of fun overseas places to do that. If he had shot it more consistently this year, or if he gets an invite, and he shoots it really well, you got to have one NBA skill. And if that was it, I think maybe last year he came out with a little more pop in his shot than he did this year, but he can definitely make a paycheck if he wants to somewhere.
Tim McMahon, who covers the Dallas Mavericks for ESPN, joined the show on Tuesday and reported that Alex Jensen was going to be at the Big 12 tournament. Did you see him, Sean?
I did see him, yes. Yeah. So
okay.
Sunday night, I got there early, and Sunday night he and Coach Eilert were coming out of the elevator, and I said hi, gave him, dapped him up a little bit. And he kind of knows me, but, like I tell you this, I was no good, and but I was one of the first guys in Coach Majerus's walk-on hierarchy, and so I'm the guy who would go up to Alex and say, Alex, it's nice to meet you. He was very kind. He was there with the kids. I talked to the coaches afterward. I think there was some mixed emotion about that, for him and for the coaches and the athletes. Great that he showed up. I love that. Not an easy situation for anybody. But then I think he left Monday morning. He wasn't at the tournament as far as I know.
Oh, okay. 10-4. Well, I'm just wondering because my guess is, well, whether he was there or not, I'm sure he watched the game. And my guess is Keanu Dawes might catch his eye. My guess is Ezra Asar might catch his eye, or Jake Walleen, or Sharav Jams could not hit a shot last night, but he's 6'9". There's some measurables to like, or maybe even the Miro Little kid. Any thoughts on who potentially could return to play for Alex next year?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Alex, obviously I want to come in with my blueprint, what I think is best for the program, what I think is going to be best for myself and my coaching staff. And obviously you got to get your coaching staff together as soon as possible. And yeah, absolutely he was watching. And I think the vibe from the kids was that he was easygoing. We know that about Alex, and that they felt comfortable around him. So that's a good thing. Yeah, Keanu Dawes. I'm a KD fan. I'm an Ez fan. Ezra also brings joy. Man, he is just a joyful kid. And other than Keyshawn Hall, he probably made people foul him more than anybody. That's probably not accurate, but he's in the top 4. As far as Miro and Mike and Jake Walleen did everything for us this year. He was a great utility player. He needs to continue to work on his shot to get better, because that's going to make a difference. But he was a great defensive player. He's a legit 6'10". Mike's got the measurables. I want Mike to be maybe a shooting guard more than a point guard next year. It'd be great. I hope Alex has exactly what he wants in his head, and maybe some of those kids want to stay, and we'll see him again.
So I know you've already referenced that you and Alex aren't best buds or anything, but, ultimately you guys do share something in common, and you both played for Rick, and you both ultimately are Utah basketball alum, and I like to think that's a family and a fraternity where you kind of all are in the same little pie or what have you. So I wonder, Sean, if you could illuminate us a little bit the reaction that you had, and then the community that you kind of find yourself a part of when the news became official that Alex was the guy.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm super excited. I was, watching with Coach Earlywine and Coach Connor that '98 final. We made it down to San Antonio and begged our way into a hotel room. At least I did. Coach Connor and Coach Earlywine has something. Coach Earlywine was one of my coaches, and Coach Connor is my best man in my wedding, and we're
nice.
We're absolutely closest of friends. And we've been cheering for Alex Jensen for a long time. We like him. He's everything that Utah basketball and Coach Majerus was about. He is the Paris McCurdy. You're not going to know this name. He played at Ball State of Utah men's basketball for Coach. Coach Majerus would always talk to us about his previous players, Sidney Moncrief, Paris McCurdy, and we had to hear about how tough they were. Well, that is absolutely who Alex Jensen is. And if you're going to have a team coached by a person that has that persona, he's the perfect guy. I mean, I don't know that you could hire anyone more that will connect the past to the present and bring us a new future.
So I'm told that Andre Miller, I'm told that is in the works. I'm not going to say I'm told that it's done, but conversations are ongoing, and I'm told that there's mutual interest in making Andre Miller, if not Alex's, I would imagine he would be the lead assistant. I don't know. And Sean, for me, as a Gen Xer, as a Utah basketball fan and student in the 90s, the cachet and credibility you have when you walk into a gym with Andre Miller on your bench is like that makes me excited, right? And maybe I'm just of a certain age, and maybe the youngs don't really understand what a bad boy he was. But give me your thoughts. If it is Andre, if they land on Andre Miller as Alex's lead assistant, what do you make of that?
I mean, yeah, I hope it is also. I mean, Andre, he's special. He came into the program, and your listeners are probably old enough to know this. He was a Prop 48, which means he had to sit out his first year and concentrate on school. And he did it. And he came in, and he and his mom were a huge part of the University of Utah community. He's the best. I'm going to put him at the top of my list for my favorite Utah players ever. He was a rebound down guard. If anything went wrong, he rectified it immediately on the defensive end. He had a great body. I mean, just a I would say, like, if you have Alex Jensen and Andre Miller on your staff, the fans are going to really enjoy what they see. And certainly from a relating, Andre was in the league for 16 years as a point guard and a good point guard. I just think it's going to be really helpful. And this move towards kind of the pro style, meaning that you bring people in that understand what it takes to get to the next level and what it takes to be a pro. You can bring that into college. We're hearing all about that. Those are two. Obviously, Alex is already there, and Andre Miller's been there, and he's coaching the G League. It's a dream matchup. It's a dream made in heaven. I agree with you.
Are you hearing any other rumors concerning names as far as filling out the staff goes? Any thoughts for our listeners who are curious, Sean?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything, and I mean that. I'm not just saying that. I am connected to the team in a way that is unique, and I mean basically I know the current staff had a chance to talk with him, and I don't know what those conversations were, but you need to bring in some college coaches that have been coaching in college and they know what's going on, and you got to do that right away. And I'm sure Alex is working on that right now, putting a staff together, because we know this, Spence. It's crazy and it's hard, and you got to get after it. And it's a 7-day a week, 24/7, 302 many days job.
I wonder if Alex would be. I mean, look, Josh Eilert played in the Big 12. He's been an assistant in the Big 12 at 2 different stops. And maybe I just feel bad. My guess is he moved his family out here. Like the transient coaching life, like maybe it's PTSD for me, like growing up and moving a bunch of times because my father was in pro sports. But I always feel bad for the families. I wonder if Alex would be interested in having a guy that knows the landscape of the Big 12 like Josh Eilert.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think Coach Eilert's great. His affect is a little hard to read, so meaning that sometimes he's kind of flat. I think that's also his strength. I think he's got a lot of passion. He's a big man coach. He would consider himself that. But, 17 years at West Virginia and under Bob Huggins, and he played at Kansas State. And I just talked to his wife last night. The kids and his wife were coming in, and we just talked about how hard it is. What are the chances 2 years in a row he's an interim head coach? No one really wants that title because there's just so much pressure, and often you're not going to get the job. He had a year at West Virginia, but I like that a lot. But, what you and I know is it's ultimately Alex's decision.
Well, and also, as men, you walk into a room and you size people up, and you're like, all right, I could kick his ass. I could kick his ass. When Josh Eilert walks into a gym, that's a big man. You want him on your side.
It is.
You want him on your side.
I agree with you. Yeah, no, I wish my knee still worked. I'd love to go out there. I know he likes to play. I know he likes to play still, but I have a feeling that we would have fun playing against each other.
I'd love to see that. Hey, last thing, Sean, then I'll set you loose. And I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm right or I'm wrong. I don't do combative radio. This is not First Take. But I would be curious to get your thoughts as an alum, because for the last 2 coaches, Larry Kraskowiak and Craig Smith, I've had alums join the show that have complained that these 2 coaches didn't necessarily embrace Utah alums the way that they would hope. Here's my question. Is that part of the job description? Like, I have a hard time believing that if you're Larry or if you're Craig or now if you're Alex, like, your job is to coach this team. It's to recruit. It's to build up the program. It's not to make sure every alum that calls you gets the most access they possibly can. And this is coming from somebody that has a very, I'll even use the term reverent respect for Utah basketball and Utah alums. And I do think part of maybe restoring Utah basketball to glory could be embracing the community, maybe a way that Larry and Craig didn't. But sometimes those complaints, in my opinion, reek of a little bit of like, you're wanting more than a guy whose job it is to focus on his team is willing to give you. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah, it
Give me your
totally
thoughts.
makes sense. I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. I know the Larry staff really well. Like I said, Coach Connor is my best man, my best friend, and DeMarlo and Andy and I got interviewed by Larry to do a job that it just didn't pan out. It didn't work out. I was going to be the strength coach, and so I got to know Larry a little bit. I think you're right on. I think that some alum like to complain about maybe what they see as themselves being slighted. But most alum don't do that. But the ones that do speak out a little bit louder. And yeah, I do think it's a part of the job. And I don't think Craig did a good job with it. And I'm not trying to be mean to him, but I don't think he ever truly bought into what Utah is or Utah can be. And Alex obviously does know, and he is very close, probably with most of the alum that our fan base would like to know is a part of the community again in whatever way. I don't, showing up to games, showing up for events where fans can talk to him. All that kind of stuff matters, and Alex has got a direct link, and he's going to be really good at it. And I think he's going to bring them back. We know Josh and Jimmy are coming back for sure, among others. They're all going to be here, and you may see Drew Hansen in the stands. Who knows?
Now, let's not get weird. Let's not get crazy, Sean, to see Drew Hansen in the stands. But look, man, I appreciate your time. It's been fun to get to know you all year. Would love to swing a golf club with you as the weather improves. And be well, man. Travel safe, okay?
Thanks, Spence. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
You got it. Sean Mooney. He's the color analyst for our Utah men's basketball broadcast. He was a walk-on for Rick Majerus. Some good insight there as Utah's season, for all intents and purposes, came to an end last night in the Big 12 tournament, round one against UCF, 87-72. BYU in action tomorrow. They're going to take on Iowa State in the quarterfinals. Sean, brought to you today by our friends at Overtime Cards and Collectibles. The address is 10673 South State Street in Sandy. Here's the deal. If you are a man of a certain age, namely my age, maybe in your mid-40s, I'll stop there. Chances are at some point you may have collected basketball cards, baseball cards, football cards, or some sort of sports memorabilia. And chances are, as you grew up, you put childish things away, biblical, look it up, and they might be collecting dust in your attic or your parents' basement or whatever. Go grab that stuff and then go out to Overtime Cards and Collectibles because my guy Chris is going to go through it for you. All right, it's 10673 South State Street. Why do I tell you that? Well, that's what I did when I heard Chris had opened up his spot. He found a Kobe Bryant rookie card that I didn't even know I had. And now it's in a nice plastic cover, and it's sitting on my mantle. And I didn't know I had it in this huge box of cards that I've had forever. So you should definitely do that. You can buy all your favorites at Overtime as well, from rare sports cards to local legends and hard-to-find Pokemon cards. Start a new fun hobby of collecting, and there's no better spot to do it than Overtime Cards and Collectibles. Check them out online at overtimecardsandcollectibles.com, where you can buy your trade, or just go check out their brand new location, which is great, in Sandy. It's 10673 South State Street. My good friends at Overtime Cards and Collectibles. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. We're going to switch gears. It's been a busy 48 hours in the world of pro football, and Aaron Schatz will stop by to talk about the free agent frenzy, quite frankly. We'll do a little draft with Aaron as well. Sarah Todd from the D News to talk some Jazz. Pablo Mastroeni to talk some RSL. We are off and running on a busy Wednesday show. You're halfway through that work week. You're one day closer to the weekend. Keep it right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, the madness of March continues. Iowa State beat Cincinnati earlier today, round one of the Big 12 championship. They're going to advance to play Brigham Young tomorrow. In the quarterfinals, we'll get back to some of this a little bit later on, but it has been, my goodness, a very busy 48 hours as far as the news cycle in the world of pro football. Good friend of the show, Aaron Schatz, stops by on a Wednesday afternoon. Aaron, happy NFL free agency Wednesday. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good. Yeah, start of the league year an hour ago. Of course, we knew all the news for 2 days before that, but yeah, here we are.
Here we are indeed. So let's just get to some of the moves that have gone down and just kind of your instant reaction. Let's talk about the decision Seattle made to move on from Geno Smith in the name of Sam Darnold. Aaron, what's your take on the quarterback situation and how Seattle decided to go about this process?
I mean, I'm one of the many people who questions what Sam Darnold is going to be able to do without the structure that he had in in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and T.J. Hawkinson. And I don't know who's going to be playing receiver in Seattle. You know, they have Smith-Njigba and they signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling today, but there isn't a lot of receiving talent there. Now, as far as the blocking goes, the Seattle offensive line is not very good, but the Minnesota offensive line was actually not that good in the second half of the season either. And the Seattle offensive coordinator is a Kubiak, so he comes from a similar tree as the Minnesota offense. So in that way, Darnold should be, it should translate fairly well. But it was a real surprise when they traded away Geno Smith, who is getting older, but, has been pretty successful for the last couple of years.
So San Francisco is now moving into the reality, the Pro Football Manifest, when you've got to pay a rookie quarterback, and they're clearing the deck to pay to pay Brock Purdy. Did they miss a window? And what do you make of what is going to happen next in San Francisco?
Yeah, they've lost a lot of guys, but not a ton. Not their most important guys for the most part. I think we should still see San Francisco bounce back with better health. Next year, they were the most injured team in the league, according to my adjusted games lost stat. So they should bounce back next year. But yeah, they do have to lose some guys because if you have to pay Purdy, you have other guys you can't pay, and they've lost something like 10 different guys.
Tell me your favorite move so far before I get back to some specific questions. Player, team, best transaction, according to Aaron Schatz.
I like Joey Bosa to Buffalo. It's only for a year. Obviously, Bosa's had injury issues, so you question how healthy he's going to be. But what does Buffalo need more than anything else? To get to Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. And so, all the edge rush that they can add. They added Michael Hoyt. They added Joey Bosa. All the edge rush that they can add is good.
Biggest head scratcher so far, Aaron?
Why Houston traded away Laramie Tunsil?
I would imagine you like what the Commanders are doing so far, yes?
Somewhat. They re-signed some older veterans, and that's nice. I don't know if Deebo Samuel is going to be as good as they think he's going to be. Jonathan Allen is a good player, and it's hard to see him go, although I will say I talked to someone from Washington when I was in Indianapolis for the Combine, and there's a lot of that as a personality issue. It's not that Allen can't play, it's that nobody likes him. So, honestly, he does not get along with his teammates.
Oh, wow.
So
wow.
That's sort of the story there with Allen.
Oh, I did not know that. The Rams acquired Devontae Adams, and they released Cooper Kupp. I get it. I understand as far as the dollars and cents. You have to make these things work, but we're not too far removed from Cooper Kupp, not just being one of the best wide receivers in pro football, but considered one of the best players in pro football. So give me your thoughts, Aaron, on what the Rams decided to do, and what do you think is next for Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, the injuries have sapped a lot from Kupp. He did really bad last year in ESPN's receiver tracking metrics that are based on next-gen stats. So I don't know how much he's got left in the tank. He's a great guy to take a flyer on and see whether he can get back to the greatness of 3 years ago, but I don't know if he can. Adams is an interesting addition. He is not a replacement for Kupp. He's a very different kind of receiver. He's really the upgrade on DeMarcus Robinson, who has gone elsewhere, and they're going to replace Cup in other ways.
What do you think this means as far as the continued growth of Puka Nacua, local boy who played his high school and college ball around here?
Well, I mean, I think everybody agrees Puka Nacua is one of the best receivers in the game right now. So I think he's clearly the established number one. He's the number one guy in Los Angeles. There's no question about that.
Well, Aaron, as I've told you before, I am a longtime suffering fan of the New York Football Jets. And, what is this, bottoming out? Is that what it is? I mean, Justin Fields, couple years, 1 year rental, and then you're trying to potentially draft a quarterback in what apparently is a good quarterback class in a couple of years. What do you think the Jets are trying to do here?
I kind of think that there is sort of this feeling among a lot of people because, look, Justin Fields does some really awesome things. And so people want to believe that there is this above average quarterback that is hidden in there somewhere. It's been 4 years, and he was kind of average last year in a small sample size, and he was really bad the 3 years before that in a much larger sample size. And the odds that he is a good quarterback in the NFL after 4 years, it's really unlikely. And if anything, it's really unlikely it'll happen with the Jets because what we've seen is the opposite, right? Guys leave the Jets and then they play well. So I think it's likely that the Jets will struggle and that they'll go after a quarterback in the 2026 draft, which is supposed to be better. Yeah,
oftentimes guys do leave the Jets and play well. I do wonder what you make of any sort of potential future for Zach Wilson, who we had Zach out here, and during the COVID year, Brigham Young was able to cobble together a schedule, and Zach shined against teams that weren't great. And, being able to watch him up close out here, I was very skeptical that he would ever be able to be an NFL quarterback, let alone for my favorite football team. Didn't work out in New York. He spent some time in Denver as a third stringer. Now he lands in Miami. Do you think there's a NFL future ahead for Zach Wilson?
Nah, I mean, I think he's got, a few more years as a backup, but the COVID year was weird. That was just a really weird year to scout guys. Look at, Trey Lance, for crying out loud. So I don't think Zach Wilson has a future. And certainly Miami, Tua Tagovailoa is the starter there. And Mike McDaniel has had problems adapting when he has to go to a backup. So I don't know how good that's going to be if Wilson has to play.
Where do you think, this is not a Jets question, but I was at least encouraged they moved on from throw Rogan. That's what I call Aaron Rodgers. Where do you think Aaron Rodgers is playing football next year?
Oh, God, it sounds like he's going to end up somewhere. I mean, there's a lot of this whispering about Pittsburgh. I don't think that he's a good match with their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith. He likes to run a lot of under center play action stuff. Rodgers doesn't like doing that, and he doesn't like turning his back to the defense. He wants to be in shotgun, and I don't think that's a good marriage. But it sounds like that might be the most likely marriage. I don't know. I wouldn't. I mean, he was a below average quarterback last year. When you add the questions about what he means to the locker room and everything, I just wouldn't. I wouldn't go there.
If Russell Wilson isn't back in Pittsburgh, where's he playing football next year?
Cleveland, maybe. Apparently he had a meeting with the Browns. I mean, he's better than Kenny Pickett, so maybe Cleveland.
Huh. Goodness gracious. All right. Who else is out there? When you look, most of the big name guys, it's already reported that they're kind of locked up. But who else is out there that you're kind of waiting to hear the news?
Wide receivers, I think. Stephon Diggs, for an example, is still available. I'm trying to think who else is out there. Draymond Jones is a defensive tackle. Cam Robinson, offensive tackle. Some people think he may end up with the Patriots. A lot of the top free agents are gone. I mean, Kupp, right? Kupp is now available. So, Kupp is a real low floor, high ceiling kind of a signing. You could have to give a lot of money to a guy who's going to do nothing for you, but he could be awesome. You don't really know. What
do you think the Giants are going to do? You think they're going to play their hand in the draft, or are they going to take a shot at one of these aging QBs?
Here's the problem. I think that a lot of people feel that Shedeur Sanders is not worth the top 3 pick. So, I mean, if the Giants want a quarterback, if they want Cam Ward, they really have to trade up to get Cam Ward. They really have to make a trade with Tennessee and get into the number one spot to take Cam Ward. And I don't know if they're going to do that, and I don't know what the alternative is. I mean, they've been linked by some people to Rodgers as well. There just don't seem to be enough starting quarterbacks right now for all the teams that need them.
For all the love that Shedeur is getting, Cam Ward's getting, let me ask you about another local project who played his high school ball here, and that's Jackson Dart, who seemed to have a pretty good pre-draft process. I don't know if he's played his way into the area of where those two are at, but what do you make of the pro future potential for Jackson Dart?
I'll admit that I don't know that much about Dart, but he's not seen, certainly, nobody sees him as being in the area. I think Ward is very clearly seen as one, and Sanders is seen as two, and no other quarterback is really seen as a first-round pick this year.
Speaking of the Giants, their former quarterback is now with the Colts. Daniel Jones signs with the Colts, and the reports are he's going to compete with Anthony Richardson for the starting job. And Anthony Richardson is a quarterback who we saw here. He rolled into town with Florida and played the Utes. A lot of intoxicating physical attributes, but it's never, well, I shouldn't say never. So far, first couple of years, hasn't really clicked consistently. What do you make of what the Colts decided to do? Is this like a, hey, come show him how to be a pro, or do you think Daniel Jones could get that job?
I mean, I think they're kind of trying to poke Richardson. They're hoping that Richardson claims the job and improves. Richardson, I believe, is still younger than Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. He came out so young. So, there's still the possibility that he's going to really blossom. And I think that's what the Colts are dreaming is going to happen. They don't want to have to play Jones. They want Richardson to claim that job. They want Richardson to stay healthy. They want Richardson to improve. But this is an insurance policy in case those things don't happen.
DK Metcalf, you referenced earlier, Seattle kind of getting rid of a bunch of pieces. I don't know who the Steelers' quarterback is going to be, but if it is Russell Wilson, they know each other. Do you think the Steelers going after Metcalf is an indicator that maybe they want Russ back?
No, but it might be an indicator that they want to move on from George Pickens, who only has a year left on his contract and is a very similar style of receiver to DK Metcalf, only with some issues with his personality. So this may be the sign that they're not going to re-sign Pickens after this year.
All right, let's look ahead a little bit, and obviously we have the draft, and we have plenty of personnel decisions that are left to be made. You referenced some of the decisions the Bills decided to execute, and bringing in Bosa and paying Josh Allen a boatload of money. But if you look at the landscape of the AFC right now, who are just some of the teams based off of who's returning you think have a chance to come out of the conference?
I mean, we're still talking about the four best quarterbacks play in the AFC. And the Bengals have defensive problems, so the best teams are the other three, right? It's the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills. Now, the Ravens were the healthiest team in the league last year. They are unlikely to be as healthy next year, so they're going to decline a little bit, but they also had some weird losses with some bad luck that they probably aren't going to have next year. So, I mean, I think those are the top three teams in the AFC. I think when we talk about competition next year, we'll talk about those three teams and then some team we're not expecting that surprises us.
What about Houston? It was a little bit of a tough sophomore campaign after a great rookie year for C.J. Stroud. What do you make of the Texans next year? Do you think they continue to move in the right direction?
The struggle for the Texans is that they were so built around defense last year, and defense is less consistent and less predictive than offense. And the offense really had problems. The offensive line really had problems. Tank Dell is probably out for the entire season. So I see a world in which another team wins the AFC South. As much talent as Houston has on the defensive side of the ball, I think there is an opportunity there for someone like Jacksonville to jump up and surprise people with a division. Not that I think Jacksonville is going to really compete for the conference, but surprise people in the division. Moving
over to the NFC, where the defending Super Bowl champs exist with a roster full of really good, really young players. They paid Saquon in the offseason. Is it Philly and everybody else next year? Who else do you think can throw punches with the Eagles?
No, I mean, it wasn't Philly and everybody else last year. I mean, Philly had a nice run in the playoffs. That was great. But there are plenty of other, strong. Look, first of all, Detroit. Second of all, Green Bay, which is very young and was very good last year. The Rams are certainly competitive with Puka and Stafford and their young defensive line, quality defensive line. Washington is an interesting team to watch. Minnesota is an interesting team to watch. Yeah, there's no reason to believe that it's Philly and everybody else just because Philly managed to win the conference and the Super Bowl.
Is Minnesota's plan just now J.J. McCarthy, or are they going to try to bridge? Oh, it is. Okay.
It is. There's some talk about Rodgers going there, but, I mean, why would you do that? If you believe in your draft process, then you believe in J.J. McCarthy. Why would you bring in Rodgers and sit McCarthy for a year? It doesn't make sense.
All right, before I set you loose, appreciate the time, Aaron. I'll ask you about the team that most people around here cheer for based off of proximity. Not everybody, but we have a lot of Denver Bronco fans in this market. So, year 2, Bo Nix, AFC West, what does it look like next year in Denver?
Yeah, I mean, if Bo Nix can continue to play the way he did in the last 3 quarters of the year, that looks very good. Their defense is very talented. They have added a really couple of nice pieces with Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. Who both come over from the 49ers. So I definitely think it looks good for the Broncos to be competitive. Next year, when I said that it's probably going to be the Ravens, the Bills, the Chiefs, and one other team that could surprise you, that definitely could be Denver, especially with the defensive pieces that they're adding.
Aaron, your Twitter bio says once upon a time you were a radio DJ. I've got to know what that was all about.
Yeah, absolutely. WBRU in Providence, Rhode Island, WKRO in Daytona Beach, Florida. I did afternoons and was music director back in 1996 and 97 at the height of alternative rock radio.
Oh, wow. What an interesting career path. Where can people go find your work, Aaron?
You can find me at ftnfantasy.com as well as a lot of good fantasy projections for baseball and other sports, not just for football, and DFS optimizers. And all of my work, ftnfantasy.com.
Aaron, thank you, sir. Appreciate the time. Have a good week, all right?
All right, you have a good week, too.
All right, Aaron Schatz, busy 48 hours in the world of pro football. We're still a few weeks away from the NFL draft, but a lot of players on the move. Local boys, Cody Barton's the Tennessee Titans, Zach Wilson's a Miami Dolphin. If anything else comes down while we're on air, of course, we'll bring it to you. Aaron stops by today, courtesy of our good friends at Burt Brothers. With over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers AFC-certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction, industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. One-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americas and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers at Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. More information can be found online at burtbrothers.com. All right, don't forget, 4 o'clock, Sarah Todd, Deseret News. She covers the Utah Jazz. Pablo Mastroeni stops by after that. But coming up on the other side, we'll get back to the world of college basketball and some insight on the process that landed Alex Jensen here to be the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. And are we inching closer and closer to an Andre Miller announcement as Alex's lead assistant? And also a new project up on the hill that potentially could lead to a new facility for basketball, volleyball, gymnastics, etc. So we'll get to that coming up on the other side of a Wednesday drive right here on ESPN 700. Iowa State took care of Cincinnati rather easily earlier today. Cincinnati is actually the last team to beat BYU. Crazy thing to consider. I think BYU's won eight straight games to finish the season, so Iowa State advances on to take on Brigham Young tomorrow in the Big 12 quarterfinals as a result of grabbing that top 4 seed in the tournament. BYU gets that double bye into the quarterfinals coming up tomorrow. And a bevy of college basketball action going on right now, of course, throughout the course of the night. It is conference championship week. We're doing our station tournament bracket challenge, the one that I win every year on the talent side.
Oh.
I mean, if my memory serves correctly, every year I've won. Like what we do for our listeners, you should go to ESPN700sports.com. We have all of you fill out a bracket. You compete against us, and then we can see your scores on one side, and then everyone on the station, there's a standing on the other side. And this is my 6th year of the station after coming back. Prior to, I spent 7 years here before I left. Now I'm back for 6. And I believe all 6 years I've won the station side of things.
I very much won 1 year. I do know.
I believe I'm 5-1 then, because you won once.
It was kind of a fluky one. It was like my fun bracket that I did on the ESPN 700 side, and my serious bracket was just completely washed. But that's how it sometimes goes. But yes, we are doing the $1 Million Bracket Challenge. It'll be up on ESPN700sports.com. You actually can go there already and enter. And then, of course, you'll get an email to remind you to fill out the bracket. So if you want to get an early start on it, go enter, give us your email, give us your data, send it in to us. Then we'll keep it, we'll harvest it. And then, of course, we'll send you an email for the $1 Million Challenge.
Calm down, Elon. Jeez. You're going to scare people. Are you going to start sending out Doge emails as well?
No, we're just going to send you updates on sports, just to be clear.
And then sell your data to other companies? Is that where are we in the business
I can't
of doing
confirm
that
or
now?
deny that.
Jeez.
I can't really. I'm not sure.
Well, let's be clear about one thing. My PSA of the day that I basically do every year on the station. Basketball knowledge will do no good when it comes to filling out a bracket. Every year about this time, I get some emails and some texts from aunts and uncles that have office pools, and they say, hey, can you help me? And I say no, because it doesn't matter how much college basketball you watch. This thing is the ultimate wild card event, which is why I believe, in my opinion, this is just me, this is the best individual sporting event we have on our calendar, March Madness. I've loved it ever since I was a kid. I consume it every single year. I badly missed the years when University of Utah was not just qualifying, but advancing several rounds. Maybe BYU will have a fun NCAA tournament. Maybe Utah State makes some noise. Who knows? But it does not matter how much you know. It does not matter how much you watch. You will not get this thing right. So as we get closer and closer, the tournament starts on March the 19th, which is 1 week from today. We'll get you ready. We'll help you a little bit. Ken Pomeroy is going to be in studio on Friday, so he'll help you out. If there's anyone to listen to, it would be Ken. So the Big 12, how many tournament teams will the Big 12 get? According to, this is Jerry Palm, one of the bracketologists, the locks right now in the Big 12, of course, are Houston, Arizona, Brigham Young, Iowa State, Kansas, and Texas Tech. Those are the locks. On the bubble, Baylor and West Virginia. And here's what Jerry has to say about the Big 12 as of now. Houston on course to be a number 1 seed for the 3rd straight NCAA tournament. Houston ran away with a conference title, winning by 4 games over Texas Tech. They're going to look to reach the Sweet 16 for the 5th straight NCAA tournament, but of course have higher aspirations than that. Kelvin Sampson has a national championship contending squad. Red Raiders, Iowa State in the hunt for a top 4 seed as well. It looks like BYU's, well, I don't want to say ceiling, because BYU certainly could go on a run and win some games and change it. But as of now, looks like Brigham Young's going to be a 5 seed. Kansas, your preseason number 1, just has struggled to play at that level ever since the calendar turned to December. Back-to-back losses to Creighton and Missouri. They have 1 3-game winning streak since then, and that was January 5th through the 11th, which is right after the first of their 3 home losses this season. BYU trucked them, Kansas and Provo, 91-57, February 18th. That's the worst loss ever handed to a preseason number 1 team. BYU, 8-game winning streak. after that bad loss to Cincinnati. And during that 8-game winning streak, BYU has all of their 5 quad one wins. So West Virginia on the bubble, Baylor on the bubble. Baylor has VJ Edgecombe, who's a top 5 projected pick. And if you're a Jazz fan, hone in on some of these projected, top 4 or 5 picks. Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper will not be in the tournament unless Rutgers might already be out. I haven't checked the score, but Rutgers has 2 of the top 3 prospects in the land, and they're not even going to make the tournament. So Baylor had that home loss to TCU, which of course stung. So we'll see how many Big 12 teams get in, and we'll see what BYU is able to do against Iowa State coming up tomorrow. Utah, by the way. So, Porter, you referenced you're hearing the potential of Utah accepting a bid to play in one of these postseason tournaments. I don't have any insight at all. We know it's not going to be the NCAA tournament. It's probably not going to, it's not going to be the NIT tournament. Do you have any insight on what this tournament is out there that Utah's looking at potentially playing in?
Well, and this is, I'm trying to track down which of the tournaments this is, but they're, sorry, I'm losing my email for it.
Let's just look over some of these possibilities. I mean, there's the CBI. Oh, you know what it is? It's the College Basketball Crown.
The CBC. That's the one. Yep.
So it's the College Basketball Crown, which is a brand new postseason tournament. Okay, and according to what I have in front of me, the College Basketball Crown is added to the landscape this year. So you have the NCAA tournament, which of course is the tournament everybody wants to play in. It's the main reason college basketball is still they still generate revenue. It's a revenue generating sport only because of March Madness, which means that if you are a P4 institution with a basketball program that's not qualifying for the NCAA tournament and playing in March Madness, you're leaving a lot on the table. Like, you need a basketball program that's an NCAA tournament team more often than not. Because if you don't have that, you're losing out on a lot of revenue, losing out on a lot of opportunity. So you've got the NCAA tournament, you have the NIT, which has always kind of been the backup, and then the CBI, which Utah played in not too long ago, and now the College Basketball Crown, which is going to be at the MGM Grand Garden Arena and the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas from March 31st to April 6th. I don't know this, but my mind is telling me that is actually during the Final Four. So this College Basketball Crown that reportedly Utah is in the mix for is a single elimination 16-team tournament that features schools from the Big 10, the Big East, and the Big 12. So no SEC and no ACC. Total of 15 games will be played during the week, with all games airing on Fox and FS1. College Basketball Crown will air. Oh, here it is. So the College Basketball Crown is going to air on the same days as the March Madness Elite 8 and Final Four. Well, good luck with that. The College Basketball Crown is starting this year. They're going to compete with the Elite 8 and the Final Four. Runs during the NIT semifinal and championship games. And so according to what I have in front of me, Utah might be in the mix for what's known as the College Basketball Crown. Here's the question. Do you want to do it?
That's what I'm wondering. Because we started the show off, kind of talking about how it felt like the team ran out of gas a little bit, right? And obviously they've been dealing with, from an emotional standpoint, a bunch of stuff over the last few weeks. I always, think that, why would you want to go play another game? Why would you want to keep playing when this is where you stand? But then I put myself in the shoes of seniors, of Josh Eilert, maybe, of, guys that are interviewing essentially for a job. And I'm probably campaigning to play a little bit more basketball, right? That's just the inner ethos of an athlete, of a competitor. So, yeah, go play it. If someone's going to invite you to come play in a tournament, even if they're competing with the Final Four on television, even if nobody's going to maybe necessarily watch it on TV, you might be playing in front of an arena where it's your mom and your grandma and the opponent's mom and grandma. Hey, you're still playing basketball. And if you're a senior, if you're Josh Eilert, if you're any of the guys on that staff, that's probably better than going home and doing your paperwork. So why not? Why not play a little bit more hoops?
Conflicted.
Yeah.
So, real quick, some breaking news. Sham Sharani is reporting the Utah Jazz have been fined, excuse me, $100,000 for violations of the player participation policy. The context here, according to Shams, is the violation occurred when the Jazz failed to make star forward Lauri Markkanen available against the Wizards on March 5th, as well as other recent games. The release from the NBA Communications Department simply just says what I just told you. That's all you need to know. You could find teams every night for this. I don't fully understand why the Jazz are the team they're honed in on. And by the way, let me be clear, I'm for this.
Right.
And the problem is NBA owners these days, most of them are billionaires, and $100,000 for them is what you find in your couch cushion. But the only way to curtail this issue that pro basketball has, and it is an issue. I don't care what anyone says. Go ahead and send me your P&L statement, NBA. I don't give a rip. I think is to do this more consistently. And the plan was, like way back in the day, Greg Popovich actually started all of this with San Antonio a long, long time ago. Quite frankly, he started it when David Robinson was set to return from a back injury. And San Antonio said, oh, you think you're healthy? You're not. You're going to stay home. And while you're home, watch Wake Forest and watch the senior that plays for them named Tim Duncan. Robinson sat. Spurs get the number 1 pick. They draft Tim Duncan. The rest is history. Later on, as Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, and that group started to age, Popovich incrementally held them out here or there, and David Stern threatened and then did fine him for sitting players when they were healthy, ready to go. This is kind of the deal where everybody just started doing it, so I guess you can't find everybody every night. I'm not exactly sure why they pointed out specifically the Utah Jazz when, like I said, every single team does this. But Jazz have been fined $100,000 for violations of the player participation policy. All right, back to what we were just talking about. What I can see and understand is, reductively said, simply playing more basketball. And certainly, if you're a player where basketball is not part of your future, and if we're honest, most of the players that are moving on probably have played, or if they go to this college basketball crown thing, will play their final game. As a player, I would want to play. Now, the Josh Eilert side of this is interesting because there are a lot of things to like about Josh Eilert as an assistant coach for Alex Jensen. He played in the Big 12. He coached for West Virginia for 17 years as an assistant to Coach Huggins. And then obviously has been here for the past couple of years. So understands the Big 12. And if you're Alex Jensen, is that something that's appealing to you? If you're Josh Eilert, do you want another game where you can show people that you are a good coach that should be considered? I mean, you kind of feel bad for Josh as he was the interim head coach in West Virginia, and that didn't work out great. And then he just took over a situation here where I don't know what he was supposed to do. It reminded me a lot of when Mike Bajakian took over for Andy Ludwig. During the football season, when Utah fired Coach Ludd, Mike Bajakian took over, and Mike himself, during his first media availability, told all of us, like, this is Andy's system. And there's nothing that I really can do with this. We're just going to run Andy's system, which makes you wonder, like, why do you fire the guy anyway? But whatever, done is done. And as Coach Eilert took over, and, Sean Mooney with some good insight here, they more or less ran kind of the same sets. The difference was Keanu Dawes and Miro Little got more time. So there were some rotational adjustments, but there weren't really any schematic adjustments. And so you kind of feel bad for Josh that he was put in this situation, which really was a lose-lose. I don't know what he was supposed to do. All right, staying with this theme a little bit, with the 4 o'clock hour of the show, we're going to bring in Sarah Todd, covers the Utah Jazz for the Deseret News. Breaking news, the Jazz have been fined $100,000 for violating the league's player participation policy. Pablo Mastroeni stops by later on. We'll do a little RSL midweek training sessions underway for the match coming up on Saturday at Houston. We'll see if Pablo has any insight on reinforcements badly needed on the way for Real Salt Lake. Kurt Schmidt joined the program this week, indicated they're working on a number of different things. We'll see if Pablo has some insight there, even though it's not necessarily his job. But a little bit of insight. I thought this was interesting. Porter, take 30 seconds and say something very, very fascinating.
Well, I'm going to update you a little bit on goings on with the Jazz, that $100,000 fine. Shams is expanding on that. It is specifically related to Lauri Markkanen and the Jazz holding Lauri out. And what that tells me, not that I know or have any insight, you'll be able to expand here, is that the NBA must have found a inconsistency in communication in one of the injury reports, in something there that gave them the excuse to give the Jazz the fine. They know they're resting Lauri. Everyone knows they're resting Lauri. Everyone around the league is resting players in a certain form or fashion. But if you move them to the injury report without, like, I guess an excuse, or you just kind of throw them up there, you kind of lose your storyline as far as resting the player. The NBA is going to come down on you for it, and it kind of appears that's probably what happened here with Lauri missing better part of this month.
All right. Man, I was doing so well after the past couple of days where I was limping to the finish line. I made it nearly 2 hours without having a little bit of an issue here. We're going to make it through. We're going to be okay. The 4 o'clock hour right around the corner. But before we catch a break, some interesting insight, I thought, on the process that led Alex Jensen here back home to be the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. So, according to what I've been told, last time around, so 5 years ago now, Mark Harlan elects to move on from Larry Kraskowiak, a decision that wasn't super popular in certain circles. I'll kind of leave that there. But you get it. I mean, I like Larry. I always liked him. He was good to me. He was a great guest when he went out. In fact, let's get Larry on. Reach out to Larry. Let's have him on because he is a fun guy to interview. He's a nice guy, and there was an argument to be made that he actually was showing some progress. Nonetheless, the decision was made to move on from Larry Kraskowiak. Well, what I was told over the past 48 hours is 5 years ago, Mark Harlan did make some overtures to Alex Jensen before he landed on Craig Smith. I have no insight on how far these talks went. I have no insight on how close it was back then for Alex to take the job, or if a offer was ever formally extended to him. I don't know those details. I want to be very clear. Now, a couple of things here that make this go around different than 5 years ago. Number one, 5 years ago, Alex Jensen was the lead assistant for Quinn Snyder here in Salt Lake for the Utah Jazz. Alex was being paid very well as a lead assistant, a number one assistant in the NBA. The Jazz had a really good team that was right in the midst of the Gobert, Mitchell, Conley, Bogdanovich. You know, that team that won a lot of regular season games but never was really able to get much done in the postseason. But it was a good team. It was a team that most people thought, all right, if things go their way, if they get a Steph Curry sprained ankle here or a LeBron James load management there, maybe this team is good enough to win something special. I'll be honest, I never was there with them. I loved that iteration of Jazz basketball. I was with the flagship station of the Jazz during that run. I got to know the coaches. I got to know the front office. I got to know the players. And I was a big fan of what they were doing and what they were building. I just didn't think they had the force, physicality, the defensive perimeter size to match up with some of the best teams as they advanced. I mean, Donovan's 6'2", Mike Conley's 6 feet 6'1". Their best perimeter defensive player was Royce O'Neal, who's 6'4" on a good day, right? And Royce was a fine perimeter defensive player. He wasn't anything all that special. So I never thought that they were going to win a championship, but I thought they were as close as we've had probably since John and Carl. And I believe, I know other people disagree with this, I think the team Quinn had at their peak with Gobert and Mitchell as the linchpins were better than the teams Jerry had with Boozer and D. Will. That's my opinion. That team went to a Western Conference Finals, but revisionist history a little bit. Remember, Dallas, the number one seed in the West that year with a peak Dirk Nowitzki, ran into Golden State, coached by Don Nelson, who drafted Dirk. And Don knew how to guard Dirk. And Golden State did an amazing job of shutting down Nowitzki. They were able to upset the Dallas Mavericks, and the Jazz were pretty fortunate to run into them in the second round, not Dallas. Nonetheless, credit them. They went to the Western Conference Finals where they got smoked. But I think Quinn's team, like the peak Quinn team, I think that beats the peak Jerry team with Booz and D. Will. That's my opinion. But Alex was the lead assistant on that team. And it wasn't just that he was the lead assistant for that team. He was a hot commodity in the world of potentially getting an NBA head coaching job. He interviewed with the Cavs back, I think it was 2019, to take over their head job. I think they gave that to J.B. Bickerstaff. And so there was a lot going on then with Alex that isn't going on now, right? And so that needs to be kept in mind. But I was also told during the process 5 years ago, Alex wasn't necessarily keen on the offer or whatever, or the situation is how I'll put that, because I don't know that there was an offer made. But the conversation stalled pretty quickly 5 years ago. So this time around, 5 years later, Mark makes the decision to move on from Craig. What's different now? Well, a few things. Number one, after Quinn Snyder decided that he didn't see any way forward here and didn't want to work for this new ownership group, Alex had 1 year left on his deal. I don't think Will Hardy was ever going to keep Alex Jensen around, but Alex coached out the rest of his contract and spent 1 year under Will, right? And then he lands in Dallas, where Dennis Lindsay at the time was. Dennis is now in Detroit doing a great job with the Pistons. So Dennis goes down to Dallas. And ultimately, Jason Kidd brings Alex Jensen on board as one of his assistant coaches. 3 years later, Alex is not interviewed for a head NBA job. And you have to wonder whether or not Alex did the calculation to say, if I ever want to be a head coach, this is going to be my opportunity. Also, I don't know what the terms of the deal are for Alex, but my guess is if Craig got 5 years, I bet Alex gets 5 or 6. Alex has a lovely wife and young children, and they're all from here. And I think the stability is something that Alex certainly was looking at because he was coming up on the end of his contract in Dallas. But the most interesting anecdote I was told about the process this time around is as Alex and Mark engaged in conversations and back and forth, Alex was undecided. I'm told that they really loved Dallas. I'm told that Dallas really loved him. I'm told that Dallas wanted Alex to stay. And Alex was conflicted, according to what I've been told. And it was one phone call that Alex Jensen made that eased his concerns. Porter, do you have any guesses who the phone call was made to that ultimately led Alex Jensen to taking the job as the head coach of the Utah men's basketball program?
Spence Checketts.
It was not Spence Checketts. He tried to call. I was doing the show. I told him I'd hit him back later, never called him back.
Man, put me on the spot again. Twice in one segment you're doing this.
Yeah, you've been doing the show long enough. You know that that's what I do. The big dogs at the U who Alex could have called to alleviate any concerns. And you're overthinking it when I tell you who it is. Coach Witt.
Okay.
I was told that
that's probably the guy you reach out to when and not like when we're talking sports. I'm talking about a guy who is working within the athletic department. Those are the people he's going to be working on the Hill with day to day. No one's been there longer. I'm pretty sure. I'm almost positive no one's been there longer than 1992 or 3, 94 maybe.
Thereabouts. But it makes sense when you think about it through this prism. Alex doesn't know what it's like to work for Mark. Right. Alex doesn't know what it's like to work for Taylor Randall. Alex doesn't know what it's like to be part of the new iteration of Utah athletics because last time he was here, it was in the 90s. So I just thought that was kind of interesting as he was weighing his options because this was a choice. This was not a no-brainer. This wasn't something that was made right away, a decision that was made, sure, this is something we definitely want to do. Alex and Natalie, I'm sure they weighed a bunch of different options, but I thought it was interesting being told that the phone call that really put Alex over the line was to Kyle Whittingham. And they spent a number of hours on the phone together talking about a bunch of different things, according to what I've been told, and that was enough to convince Alex that he did want to come back home to coach the Utes. All right, there you go. 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Sarah Todd covers the Utah Jazz for the Deseret News. She'll stop by. Then we're going to do a little RSL with Pablo Mastroianni. We'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program on a Wednesday drive right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Utah Jazz are back in action tonight. They are taking on the Memphis Grizzlies. That is a 6 o'clock Mountain Time start. Our next guest covers the Utah Jazz and does it so well that all she does is stack trophies. No big deal. Two-time Utah Sports Writer of the Year from the Deseret News, Sarah Todd, on a Wednesday afternoon. Sarah, happy Wednesday. How are you?
I'm doing great, Spence. How are you doing? I mean, I'm doing better than the wallet of Ryan Smith today.
Yes, indeed. Why don't we start with the breaking news, Sarah? The Utah Jazz have been fined $100,000. Looks like it's for sitting Lowry against Washington. Do you have any insight here?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that the press release that comes out today, it says that they violated the player participation policy on March 5th against Washington, quote, as well as other recent games, which is like not surprising. I've been wondering over the last couple of weeks, like when one of these fines was going to come down for the Jazz, because, I mean, they're resting 23-year-old Walker Kessler every other game, and they've been using the injury report very liberally this season. So it's frankly not a surprise. And honestly, I think that the Jazz and everyone involved would willingly pay $100,000 to know that they're going to be one of the three worst teams in the league this year. So kind of non-consequential in the end.
I concur with that. I will follow up to ask if you have any knowledge as to how exactly they land on when they're going to implement these fines. Sarah, I watch pro basketball every night, and every night teams are sitting players. Like, why the Jazz and why right now?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting because I don't know exactly when. I mean, a lot of it has to do with like all-star, star-level players and whether or not they're resting during nationally televised games. That being said, the Jazz don't have those, so I don't know. I don't know when they decide. It would be really, really easy, as you've mentioned, to go through and look at teams resting healthy players and fine a lot more than they do. And so it's strange. I mean, they have a player participation policy that like outlines teams have to, make sure that no more than one star is unavailable for the same game. And then there's, the way that they define star depends on like years of service and if they've made all-star teams, et cetera. And then also if it's a national TV game or an in-season tournament game, they have to maintain a balance between resting the players for road and for home games. And so this might be a case where Lowry had missed more road games at that point than home games. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back and look at it, but that would be my first guess. Other than that, I think that probably there's someone that's just like, all right, this is enough.
I'm chuckling here because I have my Twitter feed pulled up, and you can see the Shams tweet breaking the news. The Jazz have been fined $100K. And then a couple of tweets after that, the Jazz tweet out after updated injury report, available, Jordan Clarkson, available, Lowry Markkanen, available, Jaden Springer. Are the Jazz trolling us, or is this directly in response to the fine? Now Markkanen is playing tonight.
Oh, this is, in their defense, this is about the time that the injury report would come out tonight before the game. So I don't think that that's direct trolling, but there is some humor to it, at least, because I saw the same thing. I got the injury report, and I thought the timing of this is pretty incredible.
All right, Sarah, before we get back to the current state of the Utah Jazz, I need to pick your brain a little bit because if memory serves me correctly, you were part of the traveling party 5 years ago, Jazz OKC, when, the whole thing went down and Rudy tests positive, they cancel the game, and then we get the alert that they've canceled the season. You were part of that traveling party, weren't you?
I was there.
All right, Sarah. So 5 years later, to the day yesterday, what are your memories? What do you remember about that night? I think our listeners would be interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I was talking about this yesterday with my fiance, and just it's a really it's strange the things that stand out the most to me now compared to when it was all happening. I think that when it was happening and in the thick of it, it was very like work based, jazz based, and I was just thinking about all things basketball and NBA and Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. And now when I look back, my mother at the time was supposed to be flying out to visit me the next day when we were coming back to Utah. And I was already feeling a little bit wary because, you know, the only thing at the time that we knew was just that like people were dying, and especially older people were just dying. And when we learned that Rudy had tested positive and, you know, they defined what close contact meant, and it's like, have you been speaking to this person longer than 5 minutes, standing within 5 feet of him? And we were like, oh, well, you're just describing what our job is. So yes. And so I'm kind of in the tunnels of the arena in OKC. There's people in hazmat suits that are walking by from the Department of Health team, like heading into the locker room. And I'm on the phone with my mom telling her that I'm going to cancel her flight. And she's like, well, I'll still come if you want me to. And I'm like crying on the phone, telling her like, I don't want to be the person that kills you. And it's just, and Tony Jones was there, and he was just like hugging me while I'm crying on the phone with my mom, telling her that I don't want to be the person that kills her. And that's like the most enduring memory for me, is just having to be comforted in a moment where there was so much uncertainty and we really didn't know what was happening.
Oof, man, that is wild. So again, my memory is a little bit foggy because I'm getting old, but the Jazz, didn't they fly you guys home? If I remember correctly, you know, as you guys were kind of figuring things out, didn't they find a way to get you guys home?
Yeah, because I mean, so you know, we tested with the rest of the Jazz staff and traveling party in the locker room that night, and we were told that we would have to quarantine for up to 2 weeks after our last interaction with someone who tested positive, which the next morning we find out the 14 days started that night, because even though we hadn't been around Rudy for a couple of days, Donovan tested positive. We were all sitting there that night hanging out, waiting to be tested, and Donovan was there. So, but the Department of Health were like, yeah, you guys can't fly commercially. And so we were like, okay, well, how are we supposed to get home? And yeah, the Jazz were incredibly gracious. I'll forever be grateful for them putting me and Andy and Tony on their chartered flight home the next day. And so we were there with the team in the hangar at the airport when Angela Dunn was kind of explaining what the next 2 weeks would be like and fielding our questions and trying to make us all feel at least a little bit more comfortable. So yeah, the three of us, the beat reporters, were there with the team through it all.
I'm sure they were happy to allow you and Tony to fly home, but I guarantee there was a healthy debate about whether or not they wanted to let Andy on the plane.
I think that there was a healthy debate to not let anyone on the plane at that point. Everyone was so confused. I mean, they were having trouble getting a chartered flight because pilots and flight attendants were just being like, no, we don't want to fly these people if because they're being told like, well, all of these people that will be on the flight all tested negative, but the incubation period for the virus could be up to 2 weeks. So there is some risk. And so like they were just being told no left and right by pilots until they finally got one for the next day. And so, I mean, there were a number of people that worked for the Jazz that were trying to figure out like, okay, if we rent a car, how long is it going to take to drive home from Oklahoma City? Like it was all up in the air. So I think that number one, they could have very easily been like, no, figure out your own stuff. And number two, they could have, by the time that they actually got a flight and a pilot that was willing to do this, they were like, whatever, everybody on.
Man, that is wild. What was there any instant or immediate indicator that this situation was going to throw a big time monkey wrench in the relationship between Gobert and Mitchell?
No, I don't think. I mean, not like that night. I mean, I know that there were tweets that night. I'm pretty sure from Woj that were indicating that that Rudy had been a little flippant about the situation and that Donovan wasn't happy. But that was also like, you know, those tweets also felt like they were coming from one-sided sources, and so it was like you didn't really know what to believe. I mean, there was no indication at that point that I felt like there was going to be the blow-up between them that there was. I'm also really, really appreciative seeing Donovan's comments more recently and also talking to him in the years that followed. About how he looked back on the situation as like, yeah, of course, like looking back on it now, like we know that I could have given it to Rudy and that, you know, we didn't know how things worked. And he was like, but in the moment, I was just so pissed off. And like, there was a little bit of tension between them to start with. And so I think that was just like, it was like putting a match just on gasoline.
All right. There's no way of knowing this, but kind of a fun hypothetical exercise because I've always said and will always say COVID forever changed that team. COVID forever changed that group. And there's an argument to be made that COVID directly ended it, quite frankly, based off of the frayed relationships. And it was the summer of George Floyd and emotions were high and Donovan started kind of leaning into, and I've never had any issue with it. Donovan, as a young African-American male, just started caring about issues that may have changed his desire to live here, which is fine. It's totally his right. And I think some of the reaction to Donovan being front-facing about his opinions was pretty embarrassing around here, if I'm honest. But the relationship between Gobert and Mitchell, and then Donovan clearly not wanting to live here anymore. And part of me will always wonder if there was any meat left on that bone, or did Danny tear it all down pretty quickly, a little bit prematurely? Who knows? But we are where we are. So as somebody who covered that team, a team that was winning in a regular season setting in a way that we hadn't seen here in a long time, and one of the best regular season teams in the entire Western Conference over the course of 5 years. I think they won more regular season games than any team over the course of 5 years, if I remember, but the playoff stuff never fully worked out for them. But if COVID doesn't interrupt that that path, I guess, for that group, what do you think happens, Sarah?
Yeah, that's interesting to know because I think also a little piece that we have to consider, which like number one, like we can't put COVID in a vacuum, right? Like it happened concurrently with a bunch of other stuff. But we also have to consider like how did COVID change the landscape of the NBA for the next year and a half, as well as the Jazz, right? Like we don't know if COVID doesn't happen, maybe do the Jazz, are they able to do something else that they didn't do during free agency? Because like free agency, the draft, all of that next year were really, really late and really, really weird. And, you know, that led to like the Jazz getting Derek Favors, who was really at the tail end of his career at that point and had to pay the full mid-level exception for it. And then getting off that deal, you know, creates a situation where right now we're still seeing the side effects of that, which is the protections on the OKC pick that the Jazz are trying to avoid not dealing with by tanking and trying to get a high pick. And that includes what's going to happen next season because that pick is still hanging around. And so that's all tied together. And it's like, would there have been better options on the free agent market had COVID not have happened? Like, would NBA wheelers and dealers have met differently and had more conversations? And like, could they have added something different to that roster that might have helped them in Los Angeles when it felt like they were just right there but couldn't get over the hump? At the same time, like injuries and stuff that year, like Donovan's ankle injury going into that Clippers series, like we don't know how injuries were impacted by like the start and stop and resetting and shortened season and weird schedule because of what happened after COVID. And so like, I think it's all mixed in together, and all of that to say that when it ended and when the Jazz blew things up and Quinn left and Donovan and Rudy were traded, I think at that point, like everyone, including myself that were close to the team, was like, yeah, this has run its course. There's no way to fix this. And so there's always going to be questions of like what could happen and how things ended up and how much COVID impacted that, or if there was, like you said, meat left on the bone. But it really, really felt at the end of it, after that Maverick series. I mean, I didn't even feel any sort of excitement or anything after that last year that they were together going out against the Mavericks. It was just like, yeah, this is over. It's been over for more than a year.
Yeah, even Locke, during the final game against the Mavs, even David Locke said this feels like a funeral. If Locke is saying it feels like a funeral, everybody died 2 years ago. You know, like when the people that are employed by the team to propagate the message they pay him to propagate cannot do it anymore, that has to say something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's how it felt. It felt just so anticlimactic. Like it was. I think after the Clippers series, like everybody knew that it wasn't going to work, but that's the moment when everybody thought maybe there's just a little bit meat left on the bone. Like, let's try it again, please. Still, like let's do it one more time. And so that's why it felt so bad after the Mavericks series, because everybody knew a year before that it was over.
All right, Sarah, moving over to the here and now, you wrote a really good yet really depressing piece about the Utah Jazz, state of the Utah Jazz rebuild, a timeline for contention. So let's just start from a 30,000-foot view. What motivated you to write it? Then unpack it a little bit. Then I have some specifics to ask you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, like the 30,000-foot view is like, what's my job as a beat writer? It's my job to be the eyes, ears, and the voice for the fans, right? In the places that they can't have eyes, ears, and voice. And so I'm thinking, what do I need to tell them about what I'm seeing before we head into the draft, the lottery even, and the off season or the beginning of next season? Because this season, we already know what the story is. And so from that perspective, it's like, well, I kind of have, I'm obligated to tell them that from what I'm hearing, like this is not the end of tanking for the Jazz. And so don't expect for things to get cheery and start winning next season.
And ultimately, you know, as much as it is painful to hear, the dirty little secret is it's probably the right course of action. Do you agree with that?
Right. Yeah. And I think there's people within the Jazz organization, you know, decision makers, people on different sides of different staffs that, number one, they think we got to be bad next year because we have this pick that's top 8 protected. We don't want it going to OKC. And, you know, the Cooper flag draft is fine. And like, if we get Cooper or Dylan Harper or whatever it may be in this draft will be great. But the 2026 draft is also absolutely stacked, and especially at the top. And so I think that, you know, when you have a top 8 protected pick and you're looking at both of these, you think, well, you know, no one within the Jazz organization is thinking like, oh, our foundational core is Keontae George and Isaiah Collier. Like, I'm sorry, they're just not. And so when you're looking at what could be a core, we're like, you know, Cooper Flag and Darren Peterson sounds pretty good. And so that's what they're looking at, is like, what are the big pieces that we could get? And they are holding space for a world in which that could still include Lauri Markkanen, but there's a chance that it doesn't. And so all of that is being decided and kind of being worked through in real time.
So let's have a little fun. Let's operate off the hypothetical that the Jazz luck into 1 this year and they get Cooper Flag. How does that color their perspective on approaching next season?
I think the immediate aftermath of getting the number 1 pick in the draft lottery is surveying the landscape and seeing, like, are there any huge moves to be made this summer? Because I think that's the only thing that could happen that could stop the Jazz from tanking next season. Is like, if they get Cooper, they have Lowry, they have Walker. Oh, okay, is Devin Booker going to ask out of Phoenix because things are getting so bad there? Are the Celtics going to have to blow things up and not going to be able to pay for their roster, and someone becomes available there? Just those are two examples, but like big name guys across the league, like, is there anything that could be done or anything that could be manufactured out of the chaos that's happening across the rest of the league? Now, if that does not happen and they're not able to get like the big name guy this off season, then what happens is that the Jazz tank next season. And from there, you have to decide, can we tank with Cooper Flagg, Lowry Markkanen, and Walker Kessler on the roster? Now, we've seen the Jazz do some incredible injury report managing this season. It's a little different if one of your really good players is a rookie and you're trying to act like he can't play. So that gets a little bit difficult. There's a chance that Cooper Flagg comes into the league and he has learning curves like every other rookie usually does, and you can still tank with him on the roster. But I think that does open the door a little bit to, we might be too good to tank with those guys, so we might have to look at trading Lowry.
So what happens, best guess, if Lady Luck does not shine on the Jazz, and let's say they even fall out of the top 5 or 6 and end up with a player, like Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma. They don't get one of the top 5 or 6 players. Like, worst case scenario happens, they lose, but they fall out of this top 3 or 4 area where apparently generational pieces are available, and they march into next season with an unknown rookie, a Trey Johnson or something. He's a pretty good player, but they don't get one of these generational pieces. How does that color their approach next year?
I mean, I think that just makes it even more important that they get one of the top 3 picks again next season, right? Like, that's already the goal right now. And if the worst case scenario happens and they don't get, frankly, a top 2 pick out of the 2025 draft, I think it makes it all the more important to get a top 2 pick in the 2026 draft. And man, that would be bad. But at that point, I think you're looking at all scenarios, because you have to get back something really, really good, since you didn't get a top 5 pick in 2025. That might even make a Lowry trade more probable, because they'd be looking at, like, we really have to have something that's going to last us the next 10 years. And so there's a lot of plates that are spinning, that and lottery night coming up, I think it's May 12th this year, is a really, really, really important night for the Jazz.
Before I set you loose, what sort of sense are you getting from this community, from this market, from Jazz fans? We have data as far as local TV ratings, and the Jazz local TV ratings have tanked. They're the 4th lowest from the bottom as far as the gap from one year to the next. So the TV audience isn't what it once was. From my vantage point, every time I'm at a game, the crowd is good. But what sort of sense are you getting from Jazz fans if they're in for this again next year and maybe even beyond? What sort of pain tolerance do you think Jazz fans have?
Yeah, the sense that I'm getting is that the tank fatigue is starting to set in. I think that they're probably split down the middle on fans saying that, okay, I can do this for one more year. And then there's fans that are like, I can't do this one more year. Like you said, in the building at the Delta Center, the crowd is really, really impressive. I mean, it's something that I don't see around the league for other rebuilding teams. Like, fans don't show up the way that Jazz fans do in person, and that's really impressive. But that's just one building of people, and so, like, the larger Jazz fan audience, I think, is feeling really restless, and in large part because they haven't had to go through this for such a long period of time. Like, it's been so long since they've had to go through losing seasons, and the losing season didn't drag out as long as it did like this. And it didn't feel so blatant either. And so it's a new feeling. And so I think with newness and change, no matter what we're talking about, there's going to be uncomfortable feeling. But with all of that said, like, my caution and my words of wisdom to Jazz fans, as someone who has seen many teams go through rebuilds, like, it won't always be like this. There will be a point when they start to win, like try to win games, whether it works out, whether they actually are able to contend for a title, is up for debate, and no one has the crystal ball. But I wouldn't suppose that the Jazz are going to be tanking longer than at like 2 more years at the most. Like they are going to want to win games. They're going to want to try and put together a legitimate team. And whether or not the fans can stick with them through the next couple 2-3 years while they start to move towards actually trying to win games is, I guess we'll see, right?
Yes, we will. All right, so well, I'm glad that everything worked out and you stayed alive and your mother stayed alive and all that fun stuff. It's so wild that it's been 5 years, but quite an experience you'll be able to tell the grandkids about when you and Colin get busy, okay?
Won't be happening, never having children. So absolutely not. I'll tell someone else's grandchildren about them.
It'll be a great story for someone else's grandchildren. Sarah, thanks for the time, okay?
Thanks a lot, friends.
I got awkward there at the end, I'm not going to lie. I'm just saying.
Someone's kids.
Well, she's getting married. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not judging.
Yeah. You having kids anymore?
I have a child. I'm good. I got the thing. I did the thing.
I love that Dave was making you entirely uncomfortable all day yesterday.
That was uncomfortable.
On TV, too.
He continued it on his television program.
I saw that.
My dating life is nobody's business. Certainly not Dave Fox's.
It's KUTV's now.
I guess it is. All right, the non-awkward portion of that interview is brought to you by Burt Brothers. With over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASC certified. I've got some self-reflection to do. With over 30 years of experience, nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASC certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction. Industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. One-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance. From tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americus and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. More information can be found at burtbrothers.com. All right, we'll switch gears. Coming up next, RSL, rough start to the season. Chance to turn around coming up at Houston. Pablo Mastroeni is our guest on the other side right here on ESPN 700. All right, the badness of March continues. We'll get back to some college basketball storylines in the 5 o'clock hour. BYU knows its opponent. It's Iowa State. Utah season comes to an end last night against UCF. Midweek training for RSL in preparation for a tough road trip to Houston, and it's been way too long. The vibes on the show are about to improve. The head coach of Real Salt Lake is Pablo Mastroeni. On a Wednesday afternoon, Pobs, happy Wednesday, buddy. How we doing?
Happy Wednesday, Spence. You're right. The vibes are great, and it starts with that Tribe Called Quest intro, man. I love that stuff.
Well, the vibes are great when you join the show, so there's that. But I got to ask you, man, how are the vibes in that locker room? It's not been the start you were hoping for.
No, definitely not. And again, I think season over season, it's really interesting, and it just takes a couple pieces to kind of throw things out of kilter a little bit. But what I'll tell you is we have an amazing group of guys that, again, I've been here now 5 years, and this group is the most committed, the most professional, and really, willing to be accountable and learn and dig in and speak up. And so, after, a rough start, like I'm even the uncoverings from this last weekend's game and sitting with the guys and just talking through some things, like it's been so collaborative and so positive, which for me says a lot about the character of this group and really in the direction that we're going to head, because we learn something from every game and both as players and coaches. Right. And I think the togetherness and what we're doing is really palpable at the moment.
So I know your job description is not going out to sign players and scout players and acquire talent. But I will ask you, Pablo, there is a significant portion of RSL fans right now that feel a little bit frustrated that all of the money that was brought into the club after a number of different transactions were executed has not been reinvested in talent for the club, namely in the attacking third, namely at number 9. Do you share that frustration? Are you in a spot of frustration as well, waiting for reinforcements on the way?
I was just talking to Porter before I got on, and one thing that I can't be is looking for reasons to absolve myself as a coach. Right? I'm in this profession because I love helping players, and I love helping them get better and think about the game and life a lot different than they did before they got here. And so when I look at it, I think if it was egregious, I would probably be a little bit more frustrated. But the truth is, we had a 9 that we traded for and decided not to come, right? And so then we made it. We have 2 young 9s who have unbelievable potential, but they just don't have the experience at the moment. And to be fair to them, they each have a goal in the first 3 games, right? So if I was going to be tough on somebody or on a couple guys, it'd probably be our Diogo and Diego, who are playing well, but we're just not getting the production at the moment. And so like instead of putting all the onus on 2 young guys that don't have experience, what we're talking about internally is how do we be more productive from that 10 position whilst waiting for maybe 1 or 2 attacking players to join the group that can really improve the execution, the finishing, because this looking at all the stats that we have from the first 3 games is we're significantly under our expected goals, right? And that to me says we're creating a lot of good chances, we're just not finishing them. And so we're working extremely hard, as like I said, as a collective to find those percentages that otherwise you'd find in somebody, like last year we had Andres and Chicho who, they'd hit it from 20 yards out, which is a 0 XG, but still find the back of the net. And so we're looking at this more as we got to find goals from the collective mindset. Positioning is important. Execution in the box is important. And guys showing up ready to go on game day in those very important moments are important.
Since you brought it up, I wonder, because I've asked, I've talked to Jason and Kurt about this deal with, I thought it was Elias. Apparently it's Ilias Manuel. I guess that's how you say it. And look, Bob's, from my perspective, it's always interesting because our pro basketball team here in the market, for years and years and years, has had major issues with NBA players who they wanted to bring here not wanting to come here. And it doesn't seem like that's been a huge deal on the soccer side. So from your vantage point, how did this whole thing break down, and what sort of effect did that have on your group?
Yeah. So again, I mean, this was 11th hour. So we're assuming that he's in for first day of preseason. You know, Kurt and I sat with him on a Zoom call. He was super engaged, and asking unbelievable questions about the game model and what the asks are on both sides of the ball. And he says, "Oh, I love the way you guys play. I love this idea. This is wonderful." And then like a week later, it was like, "Yeah, I can't come to Salt Lake." And so, a lot of times there's especially people that move, from say Brazil to New York in his case, and they might have family members there, right? And they have a setting, a community in a certain place. And so it wasn't so much that he didn't want to come to Salt Lake; it's he didn't want to leave New York, right? And so it's the first time that this has happened. And so I don't think it's not wanting to come here, because everything that we showed from the city perspective, he said, "Oh, it looks beautiful." We talked about the people and the culture and the fan base that is just, loves football and wants to have a championship team, and he could be a big part of this. And so the whole meeting was incredible, and I was convinced like this is going to be a guy that's going to help us be great this year. And at the 11th hour, for whatever personal reasons he's had, said, "I just can't leave New York, or I have to go back to Brazil." So there's a lot of circumstances that are beyond just the professional side. It's also the personal side, and he's married, and they have their wishes and desires. And so but it was really, so we were left kind of handcuffed at that moment. And we had to bring Ari from Australia at the last second, and he's been a real bright spot in the group. So we're moving forward, and Kurt and Jay are looking at all over the world to pick up one or two players that can come in as soon as possible and help bolster the attacking group.
Tell me your understanding of where we're at in that process. Kurt hopped on, I think it was Monday. I don't know, man. I don't remember what I ate for breakfast this morning, but Kurt hopped on this week, and he was honest. He was forthcoming. He said it's in the works. And I've been doing this long enough, been around that club long enough to know that a transaction oftentimes can be derailed by the silliest of paperwork mishaps or whatever. I know these things aren't super easy, but look, man, you got to get some assistance. You just need a little bit more talent up there, up top. At least that's my opinion. So where are we at, Pablo, in the process of getting some help on the way?
So again, I think we've identified 3 different players, and here's the difficult thing with these transactions, as you rightly pointed out. If it's an international player, whenever that signing is done, you can expect 3 to 4 weeks before he can actually step on the field because of visa issues, and that's not good for us. Although that's probably those players are the most gettable right now. The other ones are domestic, and those players you can get ASAP. You can get those. They can play the next day after the signing. The problem with those is now it's harder to find players through trades, because certain teams don't want to get rid of a striker that may not be playing at the moment, because they want to use him for a reserve role. And so it's just finding the right, marrying the 2 teams that want what you're willing to give up and getting the player that you want. So that's the tough part of this. And so there's no real timeline in this on this, Spence. And that's why from my role, I just focused on, okay, so if we don't have that, so if we're not scoring a lot of goals at the moment, then we got to tighten up our defense. And so my role in this whole thing is a lot different, and it's how do we maximize the players that we currently have and the team that we currently have and the situation that we currently have to make it better for the next game whilst waiting for these guys. Because again, new players coming into an environment that's like, where you're not getting results, it's going to be difficult for them because they're not superheroes either, right? So the more that we can steady the ship in the next few weeks with good performances that lead to great results, it'll be much more of a conducive environment for these players that are going to come in to be able to really lift this group forward.
At the risk of asking the ultimate dumb guy question, do you have a preference of international or domestic when it comes to the options, or is it just like, give me the best dude?
Yeah, that's it, Spence. Beggars can't be choosers at this point, right? We just want to get a guy or two in the building that can really, and the other. To answer your question, it's either it's whoever we can get and who fits the team to give us the best chance to win. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do, and that's the aim.
So every year with this stuff, when it comes to MLS and RSL, I always remind people that the hot start will not continue and the slow start will not continue. This is a slog. It's a marathon. It ebbs and flows. But 4 goals in 5 games, if you include CONCACAF Champions Cup, and, ultimately a expansion team rolls into town and kind of gives it to you. You go on the road to San Jose. I mean, you know the deal. At what point, Pablo, does a slow start in your mind become problematic and you start to get a little concerned?
Yeah, I just think then when you've pulled out all the different stops, so in other words, whereas from a coaching perspective, where we've looked under every nook and cranny and haven't acted upon the information that's been presented. In other words, like we have, so we've been focusing on the attacking side, right? And so for the first 5 games and saying we got to get in these spots. So we are doing that, but we're just not capitalizing or executing. Like this last game against San Diego, never have I coached a game where we've had 3 breakaways with the goalkeeper and not scored, right? So that's an anomaly. So, okay, so if we're creating those kind of chances and not scoring, what's the next thing to look at? It's like, well, we can't be giving up goals. So now we're rebalancing it to make sure that we keep zeros whilst we are creating chances, and we might score 1, hopefully 2, but we can't rely on the goals going in. So therefore, we got to fortify our back line, right? And I think that's the important thing, and that's something that we can take with us for the rest of the season, even when we have 1 or 2 other players that can contribute on the goal scoring. We still want to be a solid defensive team. So from my vantage point is that we learn something about ourselves every game. And until we've exhausted all different phases of the game where we can make improvements, and we've done that, and yet we're not getting results, that's where it becomes worrying. But I'll tell you what, like I said when we started talking, is I believe in this group, and I know that we're going to get it right. And it's just a matter of clear understanding of what the roles, responsibilities, and more important, the collective mindset going to Houston is. Make sure we keep it zeros. We're going to get our opportunities. And maybe, it's always a lot easier to score goals when you're not having to chase it, right? It's because you're playing from a place of calm and clear thinking. When you're behind it, now you're forcing square pegs and round holes and passes that shouldn't be made and decisions that are just, made in haste and all these different things. But I really believe in the character of this group, the quality of this group, and we just now have to put together a complete performance. Because like I said, our 2 young strikers do have a goal that, they have 2 goals amongst themselves. It's really the other cast members that I think need to step up a little bit more to help them. And in the meantime, collectively defending the right way so that we're not chasing games.
Before I ask you this next question, you just referenced your 2 young strikers, which I'm assuming is Ari and Forrester. Any other 9 options on the roster you feel comfortable with playing right now?
No, we don't. No,
okay.
We don't have any. Those are the 2.
What a perfect answer. That was the perfect answer. So I want to hone in on those 2 for a moment because that's what we have in front of us. Let me ask you about Ari first. Is he a little bit more nuanced than just a 9? Like, is he a guy you can play elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. He is. And that's another wrinkle that we're looking to add to it because he can play out wide. And he poses a real speed threat. He's got great size, but he's got really soft feet, nimble feet, really good technique. And so the reason why we can't play him in another position at the moment is because we'd only be left with 1 9, right? And so as a young pairing, we feel really good with one going 60, the other one going 30. And depending on form, either of those 2 can switch up. So he is definitely flexible tactically. He's got a great soccer brain. And he's definitely a really so if we bring in another attacking player up front, he's definitely a guy that can slide out wide and really cause some damage from that wide position.
All right, let's move over to Forrester now, who, I mean, there are moments with him Like he's got good size, he's got good athleticism, and that just always stands out to me because oftentimes, don't take this the wrong way, you're watching MLS soccer and your striker is Jason Kreis, who's 5'4". It's like he's not a great. I'm just kidding. But Forrester has an athletic, physical presence about him that oftentimes you don't see in this league. So as you continue the process of learning more about him, what has stood out so far that maybe we're not seeing in training? Because he has scored, but there have also been so many moments where you feel like he's got to get that one, to be fair, right?
Right.
So what stood out about his growth so far?
So I would say with Forrester, he's got, like you rightly pointed out, his physicality is top. Like that kind of body could play in any league in the world. And what he is he's still learning the game from a forward's position. In other words, what side of the defender to be on when the ball's on said side, right? Like little nuanced movements to put him in better positions to be able to protect the ball better. He's working on his first touch, which is a little bit rough at times. But one thing that he is a learner. And I would say with all our young players that we've brought in this year, they're incredible learners and students of the game. They want to get better. They're meeting with the coaches every day. They're coming in and you're seeing the growth. And the tough thing about pro sports is it's a now business, right? So all these nuanced little margins of gains aren't, you don't realize it because they're starting so far behind what you would expect a top 9 in this league to be. But Forrester, for example, is one of the things that we worked on in preseason was when he receives the ball back to goal and he sets the ball back, he wanted to open up to receive it again. And one of the things, I remember stopping practice in Santa Barbara and said, no. Anytime you set the ball back to a 10, you turn and spin and you run your tail off. You just, if nothing else, you're moving that back line back so that 10 has now time to drive. You're creating space for your 10, but more importantly, you're threatening the back line. And so when he scored that goal, when he came in against Seattle, it was like this moment was like it started back in preseason, and now he's applying it in real time, and he got the reward for it. So he's a really good finisher, but at times struggles when he's finishing at speed, right? So that's another, that goal that he scored in Seattle, he missed a couple of those in preseason. And also scored a couple of those in preseason. So again, I think it's just with these guys it's the expectations are too high if you're a fan and you want to win now. But from a coaching perspective, the growth that they've had in 8 weeks is incredible. And if we can solidify our defending as a collective and not put so much pressure on them by having our 10s be a bit more productive on the offensive side, I think these guys in a year, 2 years, could be big-time forwards in this league.
So some interesting stuff there. I want to follow up with a couple of things because I understand the club's ethos of betting on young talent and developing said talent and then moving talent on for a premium. I hate it, but I get it. Okay, I get it. I've been drug along for the ride, Pablo. I'm on board. I get it. Is that challenging as the coach, though? Because outside of your keeper, you're young, Pablo, and I understand that that's what the club does. But from a manager's perspective, that's got to be a little frustrating, no?
Yeah, I think the toughest frustration for me has nothing to do with their ability to execute as much as it is understanding the game from a collective standpoint. In other words, like game management moments, like why are you moving where you're moving to? And really understanding what the game needs in this moment. And those things you can't teach. Those things are, we teach it through video, but you have to feel it. And the real way to feel it is to get pulled because you're not doing it when you're a young player. And then going, when I get my next opportunity, I'm going to do it right. And unfortunately, at this moment, we just don't have that option to do that. So we're learning on the fly. And so it's really tough. And again, I think our leadership group, we meet once a week. We talk about the ways that those players with experience in this league, or like Rafa, for example, who's been all over the world, can really lean on these guys in moments, whether it's halftime, whether it's pulling them aside after an exercise in training. And so this is an all hands on deck with this group as far as we got to mature quickly. There's no bitching, there's no complaining, there's no excuse making. This is us. We got to love who we are, and we got to move forward. So, for as much as you'd think I'd be frustrated. It's really about always thinking about solutions to these situations. Because again, it's never ideal. You can lose a big time player with a knee injury. And as a coach, I could either be frustrated or I could say, oh, hey, this is my new reality and I got to do the best I can with what we have and really drive the group from a positive perspective, learning perspective, and a togetherness perspective. And that's what we're aiming to do.
All right, before I set you loose, I do want to ask you about Diogo, who is the only DP on the roster as of now. And last year, he lands during the summer transfer window. And so, and Jason made a really good analogy about Javier Morales, who when Javier landed here, the first few months, Jason on the show a couple weeks ago said he thought about cutting him, which I didn't know because Javier didn't settle in initially. And there are moments with Diogo where you see that type of creativity and flair that Javier had, who ultimately became, in my opinion, the best player we've ever had here. So I'm not ready to anoint or dismiss. It's still early, but I think it's safe to say that there are a lot of people that are expecting more from a DP. So tell me what you're seeing and what you hope to see as he continues to acclimate.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, I think when he came in last year, it was really difficult. We were going through a topsy-turvy time. We had a lot of issues off the field, and then that kind of permeated in onto the field. And so it was never going to be an easy transition for him. The one thing that I've noticed with him this year is his commitment to the team. And what I mean by that is like one of the first guys in that training every day, right? And from a DP perspective, you got to lead more than just on the field. So that part, he's working 2x versus last year. Physical output is 2x. His quality speaks for itself. The only thing missing right now from Diogo is that final piece. And more importantly for us in the moment is really the goals. And the thing is, he's getting himself, like at the weekend, he had a great opportunity against San Diego, one-on-one with the goalkeeper and didn't finish, and he's beating himself up about it. But he's getting himself in great spots. He's doing all the things right. And so, like everything else, Spence, in every sport, right, when your playmakers are confident, it's almost like the ball just hits in his backside and goes in, right? It's like it just manifests that way. But he's doing all the little things behind the scenes and all the little things in the games to be a great DP in this league. And so, I really believe that it's a matter of time before, once he scores his first goal, I think now teams are going to play us differently, which is going to open up options for guys like Dom, guys like Ari, guys like Diego. Right now I don't think teams are, necessarily worried about our attack going into the game because we haven't done anything to make them fearful. But I think it's a matter of time when it all clicks. Diego gets back on the score sheet. Diogo starts putting up goals. Dom continues to set up goals, and Ari or Forrester finishing. Where I think the whole front line will be empowered, full of belief, full of confidence. And I think Diogo's one goal away from achieving that.
Last thing, it's always a tough road trip to Houston, but at least it's not freaking July where it's impossible. So just simple question, Pablo. What are you hoping to see on Saturday?
Yeah, just again, a market improvement defensively for the group, because I think that's where, if you're not going to score a lot of goals, you got to be solid defensively, and we're going on the road. And I believe that if we're solid defensively and we're operating from a 0 goals against perspective, I think it'll free up the group. And so, even though the results haven't been going away, I've seen a lot of real positive things. Again, this last game where it's 1-1 against San Diego before we concede to in injury time. So like those little moments are deflating when you just kind of you're going all out to score the goal and then you end up conceding two, and that's not professional, right? And so this week in training, it's been amazing to see the guys work collectively defensively. And then from that, the amount of times in training this week that we've been able to break from that position and create some really good and score some really good, nice goals. So just an overall solid performance. And I think if we do that, I think we'll find ourselves in a favorable position to get a great result in Houston.
All right, buddy. Well, I appreciate the time. This is a long year, so I'm sure you're going to turn it around. Always pulling for you. Safe travels, okay?
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Pablo Mastroeni, RSL, back in action on Saturday at Houston. That is a 6:30 first kick on Apple TV. Brought to you today by my friends at Prize Picks, which is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Very easy to do. We'll use tonight's Jazz game as an example. Jazz Grizzlies. Ja Morant, more or less than 23.5 points. Lauri Markkanen, who's playing after the Jazz got fined, more or less than 22.5 points. That's really easy to do. And they're giving you free money. You might as well go grab that and see if you like it. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. And you get $50 when you place your first $5 bet. Don't even need to win that $5 bet to get the $50. It's guaranteed. So download that Prize Picks app today and use the promo code ESPN700 for $50 on the house when you bet $5. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. 5 o'clock hour of the program is next right here on ESPN 700. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time Wednesday afternoon, halfway through that work week, and you are one day closer to the weekends. 5 o'clock hour of the program today is brought to you by the 2025 Big 12 Gymnastics Championship. You can watch the best of the best. Coming up on Saturday, March the 22nd at the Maverick Center. You get your tickets today at maverickcenter.com. The madness of March is upon us. The University of Utah season came to an end last night, most likely. There is a postseason tournament that the Utes are considering joining. Only time will tell if they decide to do that. But Utah lost last night to UCF after a first half where they were up by 12 points. UCF ran away, 87-72, your final score there. Alex Jensen was in the house early on to talk to some of the players and coaches from the Utes. BYU found out their opponent earlier today. Iowa State beat Cincinnati, and they will advance on to take on the BYU Cougars coming up tomorrow. In the Big 12 quarterfinals, BYU got a double bye as a result of that 4 seed. Utah Jazz were fined $100,000 today for not playing Lauri Markkanen when Lauri was healthy on multiple occasions. Jazz in action taking on the Memphis Grizzlies. So busy night of NBA basketball, busy day of college hoops. But Sean Mooney was live on site. He called the game last night. He'll have some good insight. So we'll catch a quick break so we can get a good segment in with Sean coming up on the other side on a Wednesday drive right here on ESPN 700. All right, final segment of the program on a Wednesday afternoon. Congratulations. Halfway through that work week, you are one day closer to the weekend. It was another lovely day today in Salt Lake City. It was about 52 degrees and clear. That is about to come to an end for a moment. We got a chilly 3-day stretch coming. Looks like there's going to be some rain in the benches, maybe some snow in the mountains. Nothing wrong with that. Then warm it up Sunday and Monday. March forecast, man, you never know in this state. So almost to the warm weather consistently. So appreciate your ears on a busy Wednesday show. Locally, the Jazz are in action taking on the Grizzlies. Utah Hockey Club is in action taking on Anaheim. That is here in Salt Lake. It is at the Delta Center. By the way, when did this whole dumb conversation start about whether or not it's Delta Center or the Delta Center? I clearly missed something.
I think it's always kind of been like a somewhat of a topic, but I will say that recently, as recent as the change in ownership, there has been a kind push from the organization, from folks in the PR, from folks who are clearly receiving direction from folks above them to influence us to call it the Delta Center, which I understand that's the name, that's what they want to go with. But when you're talking in sentences, sometimes you can't speak that way. So it makes it kind of tough.
Wait. So they want us to say the Delta Center?
No, just Delta Center.
No, I'm not doing that.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
sometimes you need the in order to complete a sentence.
Pick a different hill.
It's the Delta Center.
How about this? Get us a Jazz guest, and I'll say Delta Center.
There you go.
How about that? Just a thought.
The Utah Jazz.
It is the Utah Jazz. And it is the Delta Center, which is where the Utah Hockey Club will be playing the game tonight.
There you go.
So dumb.
Is it a game or match?
I believe in hockey it is a game. Soccer's a match. I think they call it just a hockey game. Soccer's a match. Hockey's a game. Anyway, Utah Hockey Club in need of points in regulation. Can't go to overtime if they want to catch the wild card, which I'm not sure is going to be a possibility. So busy show today. Are the Cowboys or the Jets going to be watchable next year?
No.
I didn't think so.
No. Well, the Cowboys will be watchable, but they'll be like kind of how they have been the last decade. They'll be like 500-ish, maybe.
Yeah.
It'll be real fun.
Well, at least you're not a Jets fan.
Yes.
The Jets have officially waived Aaron Rodgers, throw Rogan, who is a free agent for the first time in his career. Where is that dude going to end up, and what does that look like next year?
It sounds like maybe Pittsburgh. I'd rather have Russell Wilson, and I don't want to have Russell Wilson right now either, but I'd rather go that direction than Aaron Rodgers. I'll tell you what, I may be a Jets fan if Tyrod Taylor's your starter next year.
I'd rather have Tyrod Taylor. I mean, Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson isn't even an argument. I'd rather have Russell Brand playing quarterback than Aaron Rodgers at this point. Another dude who's lost his mind, by the way.
I do believe that the Aaron Rodgers ship has sailed. I told you that before the Jets signed him.
Yes, you did.
That was, 2+ years ago? Apparently, we're still having that convo.
Would you do a darkness retreat?
Yeah, I do it all the time.
No. I mean, like the way Aaron did it. Like if I decided to pay $30K to send you up to Oregon for like 5 days,
I'm all in.
You would do that.
Oh yeah.
Like 5 days, all they do is keep you alive with food, and you're in like a little hut for 5 days.
You're telling me I can stay in a hut with probably sound dampening?
No, there's nothing. It's darkness with no sound.
Right. So you're not hearing much of anything.
No.
You're not talking to folks. You're not sending emails back and forth. You're not paying attention to games. You're not doing anything for 5 days, just chilling in the dark. Maybe some herbs. I'm all in.
We're gonna raise some funds to send you up there because I don't think you're making it longer than a day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think you're tapping out.
Wow.
In a little dark room? In a little dark room. Well, all we're doing is keeping you alive. You got nothing.
If I'm taking it as a challenge, I think I could do it. I think I could do it fairly well. But sitting in a dark room, I do that all the time.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not judging. And I'm a meditator, but I'm not trying to do a darkness retreat. Like I said, save the money and go in your room and turn the lights off. But anyway. All right, let's get out of here. Porter, what comes our way? We are out and about on remote tomorrow. What comes our way on a Thursday show?
On a Thursday edition of the program, Tony Jones joins the show, talking some Jazz, talking some NBA. We'll flip over to the Utes hoop side with our friend Josh Grant. who was very excited for the potential of Alex Jensen. We'll get him for the reality of Alex Jensen on the Hill. Neil Smith will discuss the aforementioned the Utah Hockey Club.
Playing at the Delta Center tonight.
Dave McMenamin will stop by as well. LeBron returned to L.A. for treatment, not with the Lakers as of right now. And, of course, they are number 2 in the West. We'll get the Lakers, the rest of the West storylines from Dave on the NBA Daily Assist.
There you go. That'll be a fun Thursday show, so tune in. And special thank you today to Sean Mooney, Aaron Schatz, Sarah Todd, and Pablo Mastroeni. A little bit of everything, which is what we like to do on this little radio show. If you missed any of it, website's an option, which is ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app, and then you can take us on the go. Wherever you go, it's the ESPN 700 app. It's for free in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space, every afternoon for 4 hours, we have a podcast, and we ask you to support it. If you're a listener to the show, it helps us out. Wherever you get your shows, it's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, give us all the stars, and you will be eternally blessed. He's Porter. I'm Spence saying goodnight. Have a good Wednesday evening. Talk to you on a Thursday show. And as always, you can find that right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.